Chapter 872. Just as Ouyang Shuo was deep in thought, he heard a series of world announcement. World announcement. Congratulations to player from the China server, who says that has no clothes. For leading his troops to conquer Morocco, the news is spread far and wide. His meritorious service is unparalleled. Special reward of 100,000 merit points and 200,000 reputation points. Congratulations to player. In the Battle of Morocco, Ouyang Shuo had obtained 70,000 merit points on the battlefield. Together with the 100,000 merit points awarded, Ouyang Shuo's total merit points had reached 1.9 million. He was only 100,000 merit points away from becoming a noble, which meant that it was only a matter of a single battle. The following battle at the Fei River was the opportunity for Ouyang Shuo to advance to noble. World announcement. Congratulations to player from the China server, who says that has no clothes. For leading his troops to conquer Morocco, becoming the second feudal lord in the world to complete the nation annihilation achievement. A special reward is bestowed as encouragement. Congratulations to player. Compared to Gaia's hidden building from the annihilation of Star Nation, the reward for second place was a notch lower. Ouyang Shuo was wondering if he would monopolize the top three, leaving the other feudal lords with nowhere to go. That's not impossible. Just as the announcement ended, Ouyang Shuo heard a series of system notifications. System notification. Congratulations to player, who says that has no clothes. For obtaining a special reward. Do you wish to receive it now? Receive. System notification. Beginning special reward drawing. System notification. Congratulations to player, who says that has no clothes. For obtaining a special reward, you can pay 1 million gold coins to restore Morocco's royal city, Rabat. Do you wish to restore it? Ouyang Shuo was delighted. Whatever he wanted came true. Rabat city was completely engulfed in a sea of fire. Even if Ouyang Shuo wanted to extinguish the fire, he was powerless. The fate of Rabat city seemed to be to demolish it and rebuild it. However, after the system update, Gaia had greatly delayed the construction speed of the buildings. Ignoring the fact that rebuilding a royal city required a huge amount of manpower and resources, just the construction period would probably not be less than a year. Now that he could immediately restore it with 1 million gold coins, why would Ouyang Shuo hesitate? Restore. System notification. Restoration request confirmed. Royal City, Rabat, is being restored. Along with the system notification, the raging fire in Rabat City was extinguished at a speed visible to the naked eye. In an instant, not a single spark could be seen. It was even more ferocious than a rainstorm. The fire was extinguished, and the billowing smoke dissipated, revealing a scorched city. Broken walls and ruins were everywhere, and the ground was scorched. Among the ruins, there were innocent people who had been burned to death. At this moment, the entire city was enveloped by a white light. It was as if time had been reversed, and the destroyed palaces, houses, and gardens were all restored to their original state. The most amazing thing was that even the commoners who had been burned to death were revived. Looking at the restored city, the commoners felt as if they were in a dream. When Gaia resurrected these people, he naturally instilled Ouyang Shuo's benevolence into their brains. The king is merciful. The common people stood on the street and kowtowed to the east. Although Ouyang Shuo was the main culprit behind the arson, everyone was safe in the end, so he naturally became a great benefactor. Ordinary people were always the easiest to be satisfied. The changes of the world were truly unpredictable. When Ouyang Shuo learned that the commoners had been resurrected, he felt that the 1 million gold coins were well spent. In the wilderness, population was the cornerstone of a territory. He was originally worried that he would lose the hearts of the people, and that there was no way to retain them. Now, all the latent dangers had vanished. Morocco would soon be back on track again, and it might even become stronger with the dynasty support. Of course, the plan of burning down the city in flames was only a last resort. It was definitely not to be used frequently. Rabat City had escaped the calamity thanks to Gaia's special reward, but they would not be so lucky the next time. Even Jia Su, the instigator, did not expect the fire to be so intense. It was impossible to extinguish it. If Labat City were to be reduced to ashes, it would be a huge problem for the dynasty. World announcement: Morocco has been destroyed. All Morocco players' levels, skills, cultivation techniques, and all their in-game achievements have been reset to 0. Simultaneously, they will be collectively teleported to the sealed land as punishment. Following the announcement, all Morocco players, regardless of whether they were combat or life professions, male or female, old or young, regardless of whether they were still in the reincarnation temple, had their game data reset to 0 and were teleported away. White lights flashed outside Labat City, and the millions of Morocco players who had fled outside the city were immediately teleported away. The vast wilderness became empty. White lights flashed on top of the city walls as well. The combat professional players who had fought hard were ultimately powerless to reverse the situation. They could only watch helplessly as the brand new city fell into the hands of the enemy. The pain of being unable to reverse the situation was not something an outsider could understand. On the other hand, the Morocco Imperial Guards were overjoyed. Seeing their loved ones safe and sound, the last thorn in their hearts had been removed. The last batch of Imperial Guards that had not surrendered immediately surrendered. At this point, there was no longer any resistance within the royal city. At the same time, in the underground world, Tita and company were running through the underground world. Just as they were about to reach the demonic duckbill beast's nest and obtain the treasure they had been dreaming of, the moment the system announcement sounded, their faces turned pale as they were forcefully teleported away. In the end, it was all for naught. Tita and company were smart, but they had forgotten one thing: country. Without a country, how could there be a home? If the country did not repay them, what was the use of playing tricks? It was not beneficial to the bigger picture. World announcement: China region player not wearing nothing has won a national war. China region has obtained 10 national honor points. At the same time, all China region players will be rewarded with an innate attribute +1 as encouragement. Congratulations to China region. This was the second time that Ouyang Shua had won national honor for China region. In the 4th year of Gaia, before the national war had become widespread, China region was already far ahead of the other countries and had gained the upper hand. It was no wonder that the China region players were so optimistic about the Great Xia dynasty. Although they had expected it, the China region players were still overjoyed when they heard the system announcement. This was a tangible benefit. The Great Xia dynasty is amazing. The players unanimously looked towards the south and gave a thumbs up, feeling honored. Once the announcement was made, the entire world was in an uproar. The players all over the world had never expected that the Great Xia dynasty would make such a huge move right after it was established. They had wiped out a country in the blink of an eye. They were indeed very powerful. The feudal lords could only be envious and jealous. The feudal lords of the Mediterranean Sea felt as though their faces had been slapped, and it was very painful. To think that they had declared in Atlantis that the Great Xia dynasty did not deserve to have a foothold in the Mediterranean Sea. Now, Morocco had been taken down by the Great Xia dynasty in the blink of an eye. The lifeline of the Mediterranean Sea was now in the hands of the Great Xia dynasty. It was really shocking and unexpected. The worst-case scenario that they had anticipated had already arrived. The feudal lords that were still in Atlantis heard the system announcement and looked at each other, not knowing what to think. Henry's understanding, Caesar's exasperation, and Pedro's thought-provoking smile were all things that could be foreseen. The future of the Mediterranean Sea would probably continue to be turbulent, and it would not be peaceful. The feudal lords could not help but complain. Morocco is really incompetent. It's only been a few days, and they've already been wiped out. Unfortunately, Andre, the last feudal lord left in Atlantis, had long been teleported to the trial ground and could not hear the complaints. Otherwise, he would probably be so angry that he would vomit blood. The Moroccan players were definitely going to be the scapegoat. Losers always had no right to speak. And the Spanish invincible fleet. They boasted so much before they set off, but they were defeated by the Great Xia dynasty as soon as they left the Mediterranean Sea. They did not even see the shadow of Morocco. How embarrassing. That's right. It said that the Mediterranean Sea Fleet only sent out 2 formations. How could they still lose when they outnumbered them? In my opinion, the so-called powerful maritime countries have long been in decline. They're just an empty shell. Under Caesar's instructions, there was naturally no lack of people who slandered the Spanish invincible fleet. The feudal lords who knew the inside story sympathized with the Spanish invincible fleet. They had indeed lost unjustly this time. Who would have thought that the great Xia dynasty would be so perverse that they could even create a naval weapon like a mine? If it were the Roman or Gallic fleets, they would also have suffered a setback. As the saying went, beat a drowning dog. Now that the Spanish invincible fleet had suffered heavy losses, it seemed that they were going to withdraw from the battle for control of the Mediterranean Sea. At this time, naturally, no feudal lord would be foolish enough to stand up and defend Spain. Spain was definitely going to drink this dirty water. Seeing this, a satisfied smile appeared on Caesar's face. We've gained something after all, haven't we? He was most grateful that he was not as impulsive as Cassius. Otherwise, it would have been easy for the Gallic fleet. Thinking of this, Caesar glanced at Henry, who was not far away. Seeing Henry's expressionless face, his heart trembled. This inconspicuous little man in front of him would be the biggest obstacle for Caesar to dominate the Mediterranean Sea. Looks like I have to do something, Caesar thought to himself, and a strange smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. The feudal lords of the Mediterranean Sea were just emotional, while the feudal lords of the African continent exclaimed in unison, "The wolf is coming." Morocco was occupied by the great Xia dynasty, and the various African countries could not figure it out. This war of extermination was just an example, and it was only the first step of the great Xia dynasty to conquer the African continent. In history, the African continent had suffered greatly from colonization. It was really frightened. No, we have to figure out the true intentions of the great Xia dynasty. Some of the African feudal lords were already preparing to send envoys to Morocco. If they did not figure this out, they would not be able to rest and eat in peace. As for strengthening their armaments, that was part of the reason. Morocco was considered a powerful country in Africa, but it was destroyed by the great Xia dynasty in an instant. While the African feudal lords strengthened their armaments, they still felt uneasy. Right now, the great Xia dynasty was a colossus, at least to Africa. I hope this is not an insatiable wolf, someone prayed. Chapter 873. Ouyang Shua had no time to care about the commotion outside. He seized the time to deal with the aftermath of the battle. Seeing that the demonized duckbill beast had escaped back to the underground world, Ouyang Shua had no choice but to bring the divine martial guards to Rabat City. Your Majesty! At the city gate, Bai Qi and a group of generals were waiting to receive him. Ouyang Shua smiled and said, "Thank you for your hard work. Follow me into the city." "Yes, Your Majesty." Under the protection of the army, Ouyang Shua majestically entered Rabat City. Knowing that Rabat City had been restored to its original state, the citizens of Rabat City who had already returned either stood on the sides of the street or hid in their houses. They looked at this iron-blooded army with either reverence or hostility. From this day onwards, Morocco had changed. It had a new ruler. Main hall of the palace. Ouyang Shua touched the broken stone tablet and heard a series of system notifications. System notification. Congratulations to player. How do you have nothing to wear for conquering Morocco? Please choose how you want to deal with Morocco. Destroy, occupy, or transfer. Choose occupy. System notification. Congratulations to player. How do you have nothing to wear for conquering Morocco? Morocco is officially under the rule of the great Xia dynasty. You can make a new plan for Morocco. Do you wish to rename it? Make it Morocco Province. Unlike the tiny star state that they had previously occupied, the area of Morocco was even vaster than the Yunnan province, which was the largest among all the provinces. It was only natural for it to be designated as a province. However, the usable area of Morocco was limited. Ouyang Shua planned to use Rabat City, Casablanca City, Agadir City, and Tangier City as the center to create 4 prefectures. Rabat City would naturally be the administrative center of the province. Unlike Yunnan province and the other three provinces, Ouyang Shual planned to set up a provincial governor in Morocco province and set up a governor's office. The allocation of officials in Morocco province would also be different from the other provinces. It would be a strong provincial governor's office and a weak county governor's office. In the future, the governor's office would be the key to managing the entire Morocco province. Ouyang Shua's actions had a deeper meaning. First, with the establishment of Morocco province, the Great Xia dynasty already had 5 provinces. It had met the initial requirements to set up a provincial governor. It would not allow a provincial governor to be a separatist and unable to do anything about it. In history, the Qing dynasty had only set up 8 governors. The Great Xia dynasty was not far from this goal. Secondly, the Morocco province was isolated overseas, and the people under its jurisdiction were not Han Chinese. Its situation was rather special, and compared to the other inland provinces, it needed a powerful central yamen to govern the overall situation. Furthermore, the Morocco province was located in the African continent, bordering the Mediterranean Sea and the Atlantic Ocean. Opposite, it was the American continent. The surrounding situation was extremely complicated, and it required a powerful figure to hold down the fort. This was similar to how the Tang had set up military governors at the borders. Thirdly, the Morocco province had just been conquered, and it was not a core region. Setting up a provincial governor here could be considered a test. It would be beneficial for the imperial court to perfect the authority of the governor and explore the relevant systems. Although, it would be for him to 4-2-4-4 for him. 4. Apart from that, Ouyang Shual had another arrangement for the Morocco province, which was to build a new city outside of the existing 4 cities, Ceuta City. In reality, the autonomous city of Ceuta used to be a Spanish possession in North Africa, located in the northernmost part of the Maghreb, near the Mediterranean Sea near the Strait of Gibraltar, bordering Morocco, with an area of about 185 square kilometers. To put it simply, Ceuta's geographical location was similar to the base cities. The 2 cities were located in the south and north respectively, guarding the Strait of Gibraltar. In history, Ceuta had always been an important strategic city on the trade route, as well as a strategic military location. Like Gibraltar, the port of Ceuta was exceptionally prosperous. Thus, after conquering Morocco, how could Ouyang Shual not strengthen this place? With the base city in Ceuta City, it was tantamount to announcing that the Great Xia dynasty had firmly secured the throat of the Mediterranean Sea and the Atlantic Ocean. Any ship that traveled between the 2 seas had to obey the Great Xia dynasty. In the game, due to the overt or covert hints or pressure from the Spanish and other countries, the Moroccan players had never dared to build a city in Ceuta. Ouyang Shual, however, had no such misgivings. Since they had fallen out, Ouyang Shual naturally did not mind playing with the Mediterranean Sea Lord. System notification: Morocco province has been successfully named. Do you wish to rename the cities in the province? No. Ouyang Shual was not that bored. Retaining the original name of the city was also to give the people of Morocco something to remember. System notification: Morocco province planning is complete. Officially opening Rabat City's International Teleportation Formation. Friendly reminder: Rabat City's International Teleportation Formation can only be connected to the teleportation formation within the territory. It cannot be directly connected to the teleportation formations of the China region's capital or other territories. With the system notification, the broken stone tablet was restored to its original state. The difference was that the stone tablet was no longer engraved with the words Morocco Rabat City, but Great Xia Dynasty, Rabat City. With the fall of Morocco, Rabat City was no longer a capital, but a provincial capital. Thankfully, the satellite city had been created before the national war, so Gaia would not take it back. Since there were no players in the Morocco province, Ouyang Shual could consider guiding the players of the China region to settle down in the Morocco province and develop the underworld there. After the setting was completed, the national war could be considered to have come to an end. Of course, this was only the first step to taking over Morocco. There were still many other matters to deal with, including the reorganization of the army, the appointment and dismissal of officials, the planning of the Morocco province, and the appeasement of the people. Every single matter could not be delayed. Thankfully, after the activation of the teleportation formation, Rabat City and Shanghai City could be connected, saving him a lot of trouble. Ouyang Shuo planned to be a hands-off boss. The reorganization of the army would be handled by the Grand Council, while the appointment and dismissal of officials, as well as the planning of the province, would be handled by the cabinet. Once the two central authorities were done discussing and coming up with a detailed plan, they would report it to Ouyang Shuo for approval. Ouyang Shuo also wanted to use this matter to test the cabinet and the Grand Council. It had been more than a month since the establishment of the two central authorities. It was time for them to show their true effectiveness. There were many things that could not be discovered without putting them into practice. Since ancient times, the struggle between the imperial power and the prime minister's power had existed throughout the dynasty. As the founding emperor, Ouyang Shuo naturally did not have to worry about being constrained by the prime minister's power. However, he wanted to explore a system that could be used everywhere, one that was new with time, so that the entire dynasty could enjoy long-term peace. Ouyang Shuo's design for the Great Xia dynasty could not be said to be perfect. He was only an adventurer in his previous life. He only knew the name of many of the structures, but not the essence. In order to truly understand this system, Ouyang Shuo still had to learn more and practice more. This was also one of Gaia's good intentions. If he did not temper the feudal lords, how could they achieve great things in the future? That afternoon, the Grand Council and Military Affairs Minister Duruhui was ordered to rush to Rabat City to preside over the reorganization of the army. The Vice Minister of the Cabinet, Ko Juan, also came with a group of capable officials. They were in charge of appeasing the people and inspecting the Morocco province so that the cabinet could draw up the personnel arrangements of the Morocco province. The two ministers did not immediately start work when they arrived. Instead, they went to the palace to pay a visit to the king. The two of them knew that although the king had given them great autonomy, they could not really act on their own. Before starting work, they had to first listen to the king's instructions. That was the way of a minister. Ouyang Shuo was not surprised. The two ministers were experienced and did not need him to hint anything. During the conversation, Ouyang Shuo did not hold back and tactfully mentioned his plans for the army and the province. This idea was the outline of what the Grand Council and the cabinet would do next. If they did not understand this outline, no matter how much effort they put in, the final plan would probably not meet the king's expectations. The three of them talked for the entire afternoon. After the discussion, Duruhui and Ko Juan finally felt confident and could start work without worry. In the evening, Huitubing sent news that Agadir had been captured by the Imperial Guards. The reason why they had delayed until now to deal with Agadir was because more than 90% of the time had been spent on the road. Early in the morning, after defeating the Spanish invincible fleet, Alvaro had led the fleet to take Tangier. At this point, there were no more free territories in Morocco, and all of them were under the rule of the Great Xia dynasty. The only regret was that there was no news from Lu Bu, who was in charge of hunting Muhammad VI, until night fell. Ouyang Shuo was worried that Muhammad VI had already fled to the eastern mountains. If that was the case, it would be difficult. At night, Ouyang Shuo held a banquet in the palace to reward the soldiers. The palace would not be transformed into a provincial governor's office. Instead, it would be named Rabat Palace for Ouyang Shuo's residence in Africa. Rabat Palace was also Ouyang Shuo's first palace outside of the royal city. The next morning, Ouyang Shuo issued a military order. Other than the 5th Dragon Stallion Army, who would temporarily remain in Morocco to assist the Grand Council in reorganizing the prisoners of war, the remaining 1st Dragon Stallion Army, 2nd Dragon Stallion Army, and 3rd Dragon Stallion Army would immediately return to their stations after completing the handover procedures. On the 23rd, Lu Bu and his party returned to Rabat City. As Ouyang Shuo had expected, Muhammad VI's party had disappeared into the vast mountains. Even with the Black Snake Guard's guidance, Lu Bu and his party could not find any traces of the enemy. Helpless, Lubu could only turn back and report to Bai Qi. The accompanying Black Snake Guard spy stayed behind and continued to search for Muhammad VI's whereabouts. When Ouyang Shuo received the news, he immediately sent an order to the Black Snake Guard to complete the mission of searching for Muhammad VI alone. Your Majesty, rest assured, even if we have to search the entire African continent, the Black Snake Guard will find Muhammad VI. The Black Snake Guard received the order and made a military pledge. Ouyang Shuo nodded, but did not comment. In truth, Ouyang Shuo did not really care whether or not he could find Muhammad VI. Even if Muhammad VI escaped to another country in Africa, he would not be able to cause any trouble. Could it be that any country would dare to support the restoration of Muhammad VI? Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience. Chapter 874. In the few days after taking down Morocco, Ouyang Shuo received a few special letters. First was a letter from Queen Kaliya, congratulating the great Xia dynasty for taking down another city and gaining a firm foothold in the Mediterranean Sea. This was also good news for Atlantis City. Kaliya had also helped a lot in taking down Morocco. Once the Morocco province was on the right track, Ouyang Shuo would give Atlantis a big gift. Next was a letter from Henry. The content was very short, with only a congratulatory sentence. Through the thin letter, Ouyang Shuo seemed to be able to see through Henry's conflicted feelings. Ouyang Shuo wanted to see how one of the three future European giants would choose between the interests of the territory and the organization. Humans were selfish. What Ouyang Shuo needed to do was to wait patiently. Finally, there was a letter from Pedro, which had a hint of goodwill. Long before Ouyang Shuo arrived at the Mediterranean Sea, the Black Snake Guards had been ordered to make contact with the #1 leader of Portugal. In Ouyang Shuo's opinion, Portugal and Spain were enemies. As the saying went, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. There should be a basis for cooperation between the great Xia dynasty and Falu City. Unexpectedly, Pedro was so cautious that he rejected the olive branch extended by the great Xia dynasty and chose to wait and see. When the dust settled in Morocco, Pedro finally made his choice. Even so, Ouyang Shuo could not be sure if Pedro had completely sided with the great Xia dynasty. It was hard to say when this so-called goodwill would come back to haunt them. Ouyang Shuo judged that Pedro was a person who prioritized benefits. He would cooperate with whoever could bring him more benefits. It had nothing to do with culture or feud. Ouyang Shuo could not say anything about this. There was nothing to criticize a leader for being cautious. However, the great Xia dynasty and Falu City could cooperate in many aspects. The location of Morocco and Portugal was actually a mirror image of each other. In the future, there might be deeper cooperation in the Atlantic Ocean. As for the other leaders of the Mediterranean Sea, there was no news for the time being. However, Ouyang Shuo believed that they would definitely not sit still and take action. Kaliya's letter mentioned that these leaders were plotting something. There was a law in management. The more people involved in decision-making, the more conservative and safe the final decision would be. The negotiations between the leaders of the Mediterranean Sea were such a situation. Therefore, Ouyang Shuo judged that they would eventually have to compromise with the great Xia dynasty. The Strait of Gibraltar guarded by the great Xia dynasty was not only related to the ocean trade between the East and the West. For the lords of the Mediterranean Sea, the Strait of Gibraltar played a more important role. It was the maritime throat connecting them with other European and American countries. After leaving the Strait of Gibraltar, other than heading north to England, continuing westward would be the American continent. For the lords of the Mediterranean Sea, trade with the American continent was several times more important than trade with the eastern countries. It was their lifeline. Now that this lifeline was in the hands of the great Xia dynasty, they had no choice but to compromise. Of course, the lord of the Mediterranean Sea is not without chips in his hands. On the grand line of the great Xia dynasty, the Mediterranean Sea is a barrier that cannot be bypassed, at least for now. Once the two sides completely fall out, the Mediterranean lord will not be able to carry out ocean trade with the Americas, and the ocean trade of the Xia dynasty will also suffer a heavy setback, overshadowing the Grand Line. Thus, if things really went sour, it would be a lose-lose situation. In the end, the outcome of the negotiation would depend on who held more bargaining chips. On the 25th of May, Ouyang Shuo returned to Shanghai City with the Imperial Guards. In the square near the teleportation array, Jiang Shang was waiting with the court officials. When he saw Ouyang Shuo walk out of the teleportation array, he immediately saluted, "Welcome back, Your Majesty." To the newly established Great Xia dynasty, a hearty victory was indeed a piece of good news that inspired the hearts of the people. The king personally led the army, which made this victory even more legendary. "Everyone, please rise." Ouyang Shuo greeted them for a while, and then returned to the harem. Since he returned to Shanghai City, Ouyang Shuo could not stay idle. Taking advantage of the fact that the officials had not yet found him, Ouyang Shuo first returned to the harem to hide. Moreover, during this expedition, Ouyang Shuo specially brought gifts for Song Jia and Binger, which he had to send over. At this time, Binger was still in the virtual classroom, not in the palace. On the other hand, Queen Song Jia was currently practicing swordsmanship in the Imperial Garden. The swordsmanship she was practicing was naturally the myriad returning sword scripture. Ouyang Shuo had been immersed in the killing sword scripture for a long time, so he had a good eye for swordsmanship. Seeing that Song Jia's swordsmanship was unpredictable, she had already practiced the second level of the myriad returning sword scripture to the first glimpse realm, which was really extraordinary. Presumably, Song Jia had been diligently practicing during this period of time and did not neglect her swordsmanship practice. "Wu, you're back." Perhaps because she felt Ouyang Shuo's gaze, Song Jia finally noticed Ouyang Shuo, who was standing not far away. Her face was full of joy. Not seeing him for a month felt like 3 years. Ouyang Shuo smiled, clapped his hands, and said, "Madam's swordsmanship is getting more and more proficient." Although they had already ascended to the throne, when there were no outsiders, the husband and wife did not address each other as king and queen, which seemed distant. Of course, in front of Ouyang Shuo, Song Jia was also not modest, which was rare. She said, "You don't know how hard I've been practicing swordsmanship during this period of time. The myriad returning sword scripture is too complicated. Just learning it is difficult." Ouyang Shuo nodded. The husband and wife chatted and laughed as they moved to a nearby pavilion. There were already maidservants serving tea and pastries. They stood by the side, ready to serve at any time. Standing behind Song Jia was her personal female official. When she saw the queen smiling, a smile also suffused on her face. The queen would only be so relaxed when she saw the king. The queen was usually in charge of the harem, but she was extremely dignified, making it difficult for people to get close to her. As for the king, at this moment, the high and mighty king had fallen into the mortal world, turning into an ordinary good man who doted on his wife. He had retracted all of his sharpness. Such a scene could only be seen by personal female officials like them. Ouyang Shuo and Song Jia were already used to being served in such a manner. They chatted as though there was no one else around. As they chatted, they talked about the movie Beauty of Rivers and Mountains that had recently been released. "Wooey, guess what the final box office of Beauty of Rivers and Mountains was?" Song Jia could not hide her excitement. Ouyang Shuo clearly remembered that in his previous life, Beauty of Rivers and Mountains had a viewership of 20 million. Excluding Gaia's commission, the actual earnings were 2 million gold coins. The net profit was 1 million gold coins. This life was clearly different. Ouyang Shuo made a mental estimate and said, 3 million gold coins? There were 100 million players in the China server, so 30 million viewership was basically the limit. It could be said to be legendary. After all, no matter how popular a movie was, no matter how strong the promotion, it was impossible to bring everyone into the cinema. Song Jia shook her head. "It hasn't reached 3 million? That's normal." Ouyang Shuo consoled her. Song Jia giggled and stretched out 4 fair fingers. She said with a smile, "It's 4 million. What? That's impossible." Ouyang Shuo was dumbfounded. What kind of concept was 40 million viewership? Excluding the children and the unwell elderly, more than half of the players in the China server had watched Beauty of Rivers and Mountains. This was nearly impossible. How'd you do it? Ouyang Shuo was really curious. Even if the production of Beauty of Rivers and Mountains in this life was better, it was unlikely to achieve such a glorious result. Song Jia smiled and said, "Speaking of which, that article of yours was a great help. In addition, not long after Beauty of Rivers and Mountains was released, the Great Xia Dynasty was established. Knowing that the movie was invested by Mountain Sea Entertainment Holdings, and with a large number of players spontaneously recommending it, the number of people watching the movie unexpectedly reached a second climax. According to Gaia statistics, at least 2 million players have watched it twice. There were even some who watched it 3 or 4 times." Ouyang Shuo was enlightened. It was no wonder. This kind of movie viewing miracle was truly a result of fate. It was probably difficult to replicate. In that case, with just Beauty of Rivers and Mountains, Mountain Sea Entertainment Holdings had realized a profit of more than 2 million gold coins. In this life, Beauty of Rivers and Mountains was produced with excellent quality, so the production cost was naturally higher. Ouyang Shuo shook his head and said with a sigh, "You guys are really robbing us." Song Jia was similarly in a good mood as she said with a smile, "That's not all. Gaia has already agreed to arrange for Beauty of Rivers and Mountains to be screened globally in June. Gaia has its own translation system, so we don't even need to translate." Ouyang Shuo fell silent. In his previous life, Gaia, as 5 years had not seen a movie screened globally. It seemed like the craziness of Beauty of Rivers and Mountains had even triggered the usually calm Gaia. Just the thought of the global market was tempting. Although there were cultural differences, a conservative estimate was that it would earn at least 4 million in the box office. Ignoring everything else, China's culture was still the only orthodox in Asia, and it was extremely popular. According to Song Jia, the success of Beauty of Rivers and Mountains had undoubtedly motivated the big shots in the film industry who had signed a contract with Mountain Sea Entertainment Holdings. Other than the completed Hua Tsubing disease, the group was preparing to film 2 more movies in Gaia as 4 years. The funding source was the box office profits of Beauty of Rivers and Mountains. As long as the box office of Hua Tsubing disease passed the mark, the group would enter a virtuous cycle. The entire China's capital market had been stirred up by the brilliant success of Beauty of Rivers and Mountains. All sorts of tycoons were tempted to invest in the film industry. Only then did they realize that more than 80% of the big shots in the film industry had been recruited by Mountain Sea Entertainment Holdings. All they could do was beat their chests and stamp their feet. It was not that no one wanted to poach from Mountain Sea Entertainment Holdings, but these big shots were no fools. They knew that the Great Xia Dynasty was backing the group. If they had such a backing, wouldn't they be sick in the head to jump ship? Therefore, some of the actors in the group would rather play supporting roles in the movies prepared by the group than jump ship. This made the rich people who waved the gold notes helpless, and they could only run to fight for the 20% that slipped through the net. Mobile users, please browse and enjoy a better reading experience. Chapter 875. Just based on Ouyang Shuo's foresight, she was going to create a terrifying entertainment corporation worth over 10 million. As long as she didn't make any mistakes in the future, Song Jia wasn't far from her goal of becoming the entertainment pope. Ouyang Shuo smiled and said, "Let's not go too far. We can consider letting external investors invest in some of our movies. It's a win-win situation. We can also consider giving the lead actors and directors a bonus from the box office." Even in the game, making movies was a capital-intensive business. It was difficult to leverage the entire pie with just the funds of Shanghai Entertainment Holding Group. "I know." Song Jia smiled and nodded. At noon, Bing'er finished school, and the family had a reunion dinner. Bing'er was now the Princess Royal. The teacher in the afternoon had also been changed. It was no longer an ordinary teacher. Following Ouyang Shuo's suggestion, Confucius took Bing'er as his last disciple. She was also Confucius' only female disciple. This change meant that some of the inherent concepts within the Confucian school were changing. Under the leadership of Confucius, the Confucian school was shedding its decadent and stubborn clothes and showing new vitality. In the future, the Confucian school of thought might not be able to gain a foothold in the Confucian school. The only thing that Ouyang Shuo felt regretful about was that even though Confucius had taken over Jiangshang as the principal of Southwest University China Hall, the system still didn't recognize the Confucian school as a part of the Great Xia dynasty. There might be some hidden conditions. Other than Confucius, Bing-er had teachers who specialized in the four arts. They were all influential figures in the Southwest University China Hall. Even the ancient princes didn't have the fortune to enjoy such a luxurious team of teachers. Everyone knew that the king favored the princess royal. However, the princess royal was smart, obedient, and cute. She was doted on by all the teachers. For Bing-er's class schedule, the 5 teachers argued and wanted to extend class time. As such, it became an interesting story in the Southwest University China Hall. Under the influence of such a rich atmosphere, Bing-er was growing well. This made Ouyang Shuo very happy. Ouyang Shuo took a break at noon. At 2 o'clock in the afternoon, he appeared in the imperial study. In the spacious and bright imperial study, Qingyi arrived one step earlier than Ouyang Shuo. She placed a thick stack of memorials in front of Ouyang Shuo's desk. Ouyang Shuo guessed that this last would dive into the memorials as soon as she came back. After working together for a period of time, it was proven that Qingyi was indeed extraordinary. She lived up to her name of being one of the 3 female Zhuge sisters. On many of the memorials, Qingyi was able to come up with suggestions that made Ouyang Shuo's eyes light up, saving him a lot of energy. Qingyi, this great secret, was gradually becoming Ouyang Shuo's right-hand man. After Ouyang Shuo sat down, he wasn't in a hurry to read through the memorials. When he returned to Shanghai City this time, there were 3 people waiting for him to summon. They were all famous historical figures who came to seek refuge after the establishment of the Great Xia dynasty. The first to be summoned by Ouyang Shuo was a lady. Moreover, she was a peerless beauty. She was precisely one of the 4 great beauties of China's ancient times, Wang Zhaojun. In the first year of the reign of Emperor Yuan of Han, Wang Zhaojun was selected to enter the palace and became a palace maid. 5 years later, in the first month, the Xiongnu Chanyu Hu Hangxi visited the Han Empire for the 3rd time and asked to be his son-in-law. Wang Zhaojun was ordered to marry him, and she was given the title of consort Ninghu. The two lived together for 3 years and had a son, Itu Ziashi, who later became the right king of the Xiongnu. In the 2nd year of the reign of Jianshi, Chanyu Hu Hangxi passed away, and Wang Zhaojun submitted a petition to the Han imperial court. Emperor Cheng of Han ordered her to follow the customs of the Hu and remarry Chanyu Hu Hangxi's eldest son, implicating the Chanyu. After Wang Zhaojun passed away, she was buried in the southern suburbs of Hahat. The tomb was next to Mount Daqing and the Yellow River. Later generations called it Green Tomb. In the Jin dynasty, in order to avoid the taboo of Emperor Sima Zhao of the Jin dynasty, she changed her name to Ming Jun and was known as Ming Fei. When Wang Zhaojun was mentioned, the first thing that came to mind was Wang Zhaojun leaving the fortress. For the country, this kind of marriage could naturally bring a short period of peace. However, for Wang Zhaojun, it was a complete tragedy. Because of this, Ouyang Shuo was extremely disgusted with the so-called marriage. Only the weak would need to rely on sacrificing women to maintain the so-called peace. Seizing benefits was not what the strong would do. Wang Zhaojun's first destination was not Shanghai City, but Zhenan County. She sought refuge with the Zhen and county governor, Mu Lanyue. Mu Lanyue naturally had the special effect of attracting female historical figures. Even if she was not a feudal lord, there would still be people seeking refuge with her. Mu Lanyue let Wang Zhaojun stay in her residence for a period of time before recommending her to Royal City. However, she knew that Ouyang Shuo still had a B-level storyline mission for beauties waiting to be completed. Your servant Wang Zhaojun greets your majesty. After Wang Zhaojun entered, she bowed gracefully. Her beautiful eyes were misty and lovely. She looked at Ouyang Shuo with curiosity and probing eyes, but there was no fear. The historical Wang Zhaojun had seen the world and naturally would not have stage fright. Perhaps Gaia was also not interested in marriage. When Wang Zhaojun appeared in the wilderness, she was still a young girl. Her skin was as white as jade, and her figure was voluptuous. However, she looked like before she was married. She was truly devastatingly beautiful. According to legend, Zhao Jun bid farewell to her homeland and set off to the north. Along the way, yellow sand billowed, horses neighed, and wild geese cried. Zhao Jun found it difficult to calm down, so she played the pipa grudge on the horse. The sad and sweet sound of the pipa and the beautiful woman caused the wild geese flying south to forget to flap their wings. They all fell onto the flat sand. Thus, fallen geese became Wang Zhaojun's name. From this, one could see Zhao Jun's beauty. When Ouyang Shuo saw her, he could not help but be dazzled. Such a peerless beauty was indeed rare. Please rise. Ouyang Shuo instantly regained his senses and checked Wang Zhaojun's attributes. Name, Wang Zhaojun, God tier. Title, one of the four ancient beauties of China dynasty. Western Han Dynasty identity. Citizen of the Great Xia Dynasty. Occupation, court pipa performer. Loyalty, 70 root bone, 18 perception, 15 charm, 22 fortune, 12 specialty. Music, increase territories artistic level by 15, increase territories music standard by 10, increase territories popularity by 10. Evaluation, the Western Han Dynasty Emperor's personal palace made, elegant and generous. Beautiful, good at music. The four beauties each had their own strengths, and were all first-class beauties. At this moment, a system notification sounded in Ouyang Shuo's ears. System notification. Congratulations to player, don't say you don't have clothes. Within 3 years, you have obtained the recognition of Shi Shi, Diao Chan, and Wang Zhaojun, one of the four ancient beauties of China. One by one, you have settled down in Shanghai City. You have successfully completed the B-grade storyline quest, 4 Beauties. You have been specially rewarded with the title City of Charm and 8 charm points. Congratulations! Ouyang Shuo let out a long sigh of relief. This was the longest storyline quest he had ever done. It had been triggered when Fan Li and Shi Shi had settled down in Shanghai City. It had already been a year and a half since then. As for whether the last of the 4 beauties, Yang Yuhuan, could come to Shanghai City, it was all up to fate. City of Charm. The capital city's charm increases by 35. The capital city's attraction rate increases by 10. The capital city's cultural atmosphere increases by 15. The capital city's entertainment atmosphere increases by 20. Although the quest was difficult, the title reward was ordinary. It could be considered a kind of reward for Shanghai City. As for the reward of 8 charm points, it was a pleasant surprise. With this, Ouyang Shuo's 4 innate attributes no longer had any shortcomings. Looking at the peerless beauty in front of him, Ouyang Shuo was thinking about how to arrange a place for Wang Zhaojun. Unlike Shi Shi and Diao Chan, whose hearts belonged to someone else, Wang Zhaojun was still alone. Ouyang Shuo did not have the intention to steal her beauty. He did not have the intention to cause trouble with an NPC. Even though it was like this, Ouyang Shuo wasn't willing to let such a peerless beauty stay in her room all day and waste away her time, as it was truly too boring. So he had to find something for Wang Zhaojun to do. Thinking about the movie he had talked about with Song Jia in the morning, Ouyang Shuo suddenly had a bold idea. What would the effect be if he packaged Wang Zhaojun into a super idol who could sing, and act? This was not Ouyang Shuo's fantasy. First, Wang Zhaojun's appearance and temperament were obvious. Even an international superstar like Wu Qingsheng would be overshadowed by Wang Zhaojun's peerless beauty. This alone was the prerequisite to become a super idol. Second, as one of the 4 ancient beauties of China, Wang Zhaojun had the ability to attract fans. The name Wang Zhaojun was a golden signboard even without any promotion from Shanghai Entertainment Holdings. It was obvious that if Wang Xiaojun stepped into the film and television industry, she would cause countless men and women to go crazy over her. This was something that countless newcomers could not hope to achieve. It was a unique innate advantage. Third, although Wang Xiaojun was only an NPC, in this open era, virtual idols were nothing new. Players were very accepting of them. Many shut-ins were far more obsessed with virtual idols than they were with real-life idols. Otherwise, Huazubing wouldn't have been so popular in the Chinese server. Hence, there was no cognitive barrier to turning Wang Xiaojun into a super idol. Fourth, not only was Wang Xiaojun beautiful, she was also very talented. Disregarding everything else, Wang Xiaojun's pipa music alone was something that countless singers in the real world could not hope to achieve. As long as Shanghai Entertainment Holdings operated properly and let Wang Xiaojun debut as a singer, then slowly expand into the film and television industry, she would definitely be popular all over China. There were composers in the group who would create ancient songs for Wang Xiaojun. There were also acting teachers and dance teachers who would teach Wang Xiaojun. Apart from that, there was also a top dancer like Jiao Chan. Hence, the combination of Wang Xiaojun and Shanghai Entertainment Holdings would be a truly powerful combination. 1 plus 1 was greater than 2. He was excited just thinking about it. In just a short while, Ouyang Shua's mind was already spinning. The more he thought about it, the more he felt that the idea was plausible. What about Wang Xiaojun? As a young girl, no matter how inexperienced she was, she could not help but blush when the king stared at her. She lowered her head, feeling uneasy. Wang Xiaojun wondered if the king had taken a liking to her. At that time, should she say no or just agree? The girl was conflicted. Chapter 876. Wang Xiaojun was in a dilemma when Ouyang Shua spoke again. Xiaojun, have you thought about what you want to do in the future? Wang Xiaojun was startled and her face turned red. The script was not right. Fortunately, she had seen the world and quickly calmed her mind. She respectfully said, "This concubine was a palace made before. If your majesty doesn't mind, this concubine is willing to be a palace made in the palace." Wang Xiaojun had no relatives in Shanghai City. Other than entering the palace, she really didn't know any other way out. In ancient times, a woman's beauty would often attract trouble, especially a beautiful woman. She was a femme fatale. Other than being a femme fatale, beauties were often unlucky. In Zhenan County, she had the protection of Mulan Lanyue. This was one of the reasons why Wang Xiaojun agreed to Mulan Lanyue's suggestion and came to Shanghai City to meet His Majesty. In Mulan Lanyue's words, His Majesty was the only one who could protect Xiaojun in the wilderness. Ouyang Shua shook his head. He didn't dare to accept such a beautiful palace maid. No matter how tolerant Song Jia was, she wouldn't be able to keep such a beauty by her side. "Do you like to play the pipa and sing?" Ouyang Shua asked. Wang Xiaojun was stunned again. She didn't know what His Majesty meant. Ouyang Shua explained, "With your beauty and talent, being a palace maid is like casting pearls before swine. I have a good place to go. I don't know if you are willing." As he spoke, he gave Wang Xiaojun a simple explanation about singers in real life. This time, Wang Xiaojun wasn't the only one who was stunned. Cyan Yi also raised her head and widened her eyes. She looked at Ouyang Shua as if he was a monster. There were always rumors in the outside world that one of the reasons why the Great Xia dynasty was able to get to where it was today was because of Ouyang Shua, the leader of the dynasty. But this time, it was a bit too rebellious. Nurture Wang Xiaojun into an idol? Only he can think of that. Cyan Yi was completely convinced. Although she didn't dare to believe it, Cyan Yi couldn't help but imagine the scene of Wang Xiaojun singing on stage. She was filled with anticipation. Then, "I'll give it a try." Wang Xiaojun didn't know how to refuse, so she could only answer like this. Ouyang Shua also knew that this matter couldn't be rushed, so he said with a smile, "All right, then let's leave it at that for now. This king will have the queen explain the specifics to you." "Yes, sir." Seeing this, Wang Xiaojun tactfully took her leave. She didn't know that from this moment on, her fate had taken a 180-degree turn. A superstar was slowly rising up. Looking at Wang Zhaojuan's slender back, Ouyang Shua thought of Mu Lanyue, who had recommended Wang Zhaojun. This girl had been training as the county governor for a year and a half. She had already achieved great things and could take on great responsibilities. In addition, Mu Lanyue's recommendation of Wang Zhaojun had been meritorious. So Ouyang Shua wanted to promote Mu Lanyue to the position of Moroka Province's governor. The Moroka Province was isolated on the sea, so the governor had to be someone Ouyang Shua trusted. In terms of trust, Mu Lanyue was definitely one of the people Ouyang Shua trusted the most. As for her abilities, she could use the previous Zhen and county as an example and assign a few capable assistants to Mulanyu. Reality proved that although Mulanyu didn't have much of her own opinions at the start, she was a rare political talent. In the past year and a half, Mulanyu had governed Zhen and county well, which was beyond Ouyang Shua's expectations. It was just that the Moroka province was isolated on the sea, so he had to consult Mulanyu herself for this appointment. Thinking of this, Ouyang Shua turned to Qingyi and said, "Send an edict to Zhen and county governor Mu Lanyue. Tell her to depart immediately and report to the capital." Zhen and county didn't have a transportation formation, so she had to go through relay stations. Yes, a trace of doubt flashed in Qingyi's eyes, but she still nodded in agreement. Logically speaking, it was only the 5th month, so it wasn't the time for the county governor to report to the capital. There must be a deeper meaning to summoning Mulanyu to the capital at this time. As a scholar of the Pavilion of Secret Texts, Qingyi scrupulously abided by her duties. She knew that it was best not to ask what she shouldn't. After sending off Wang Zhaojun, the second person Ouyang Shua received was a military general. It was the famous Fubo General Ma Yuan. At the same time, he was also the descendant of Ma Fu Jun Zhao Shi and the ancestor of the 5 horses of Western Liang. Ma Yuan, courtesy name Wen Yuan, was a famous military strategist from the end of the Western Han Dynasty to the beginning of the Eastern Han Dynasty. He was one of the founding generals of the Eastern Han Dynasty. During the last years of the Xian Dynasty, the world was in chaos. Ma Yuan was a subordinate of Kuei Shao, a warlord of Longyu, and was trusted by Kuei Shao. Later, he submitted to Emperor Guangwu, Lu Xiu, and contributed to Lu Xiu's unification of the world. After the unification of the world, although Ma Yuan was old, he still volunteered to fight in the east and west. He defeated the Chong people in the west and conquered Jiaoji in the south. He was promoted to the Fubo General and was conferred the title of Marquis of New Breath. He was given the honorific Ma Fubo. Ma Yuan's spirit of dying on the battlefield was revered by his descendants. Later, while fighting against the 5 Stream Barbarians, he contracted a serious illness and unfortunately passed away. General Ma Yuan pays his respects to the king. Ma Yuan, who had appeared in the wilderness, was nearly 50 years old and was a veteran general. Including Zhao Shi and Zhao Kuo, as well as the 5 horses of Western Liang during the 3 Kingdoms period, the Ma family had 8 generals in the Great Xia dynasty. Ma Yuan had defected to the Great Xia dynasty for 2 reasons. Firstly, Zhao Shi, Ma Chao, and the others had all become generals in the dynasty, so they could look out for each other. Secondly, the Great Xia dynasty had just been established, and everything was new. Naturally, it attracted people from all over the world. "General, please rise." Ouyang Shua also respected Ma Yuan. Ma Yuan could be considered a key figure in the Ma family's future. Moreover, Morocco needed an experienced general like Ma Yuan to reorganize its army. Although Ma Yuan was not a famous general in history, he was still a good general and was revered by later generations. Name: Ma Yuan, king level, dynasty, late Western Han to early Eastern Han identity, general of the Great Xia dynasty occupation, high-level general loyalty, 75 commander, 75 martial power, 75 intelligence, 68 politics, 50 specialty. Good general increases attack power by 15, increases marching speed by 25. Technique: Fubo swordsmanship, equipment, broadsword evaluation. Ma Yuan served in the imperial court for 22 years. He left the desert in the north and crossed the river and sea in the south. He was exposed to danger, and his military was paralyzed. His name was destroyed, and his territory was not passed down. Before coming to see the king, Ma Yuan had already stayed in Shanghai City for a while. He had interacted with Zhao Kuo and the other clansmen, so he was not completely clueless about the Great Xia dynasty. Now that he knew that the king had personally led the army and returned victorious, Ma Yuan knew that his chance to become an official had come. Sure enough, after chatting for a while, Ouyang Shua hinted that he would arrange for Ma Yuan to take on the position of division commander in the upcoming army reorganization. In the end, Ouyang Shua smiled and said, "I wonder if the general is willing to lead the army overseas." Morocco province was isolated overseas and was located in a strategic location, so it was necessary to station a large number of troops there. Otherwise, it would be difficult to maintain long-term peace. Ma Yuan had fought at the border all year round, so he did not mind. He cupped his fists and said, "I am willing to go." Ouyang Shua nodded in satisfaction and said, "Good. Old general, you can rest in Royal City for a while. Ma Tung, Ma Chao, Ma Xiao, and the other imperial guards have also returned to the capital. We can reunite and wait for the official transfer order from the Bureau of Military Affairs." Yes. Ma Yuan received the order and took his leave. He also wanted to see Ma Chao and the others. After sending off the old General Ma Yuan, the last historical figure that Ouyang Shua received was also an old man. This old man was none other than the famous medical saint, Zhang Zhongjing. Zhang Zhongjing, whose given name was Ji, came from Niyang County of the Eastern Han Dynasty. Zhang Zhongjing lived in the last years of the Eastern Han Dynasty, which was an extremely turbulent era in China's history. According to historical records, there were 3 major epidemics during the reign of Emperor Huan of the Eastern Han Dynasty, 5 major epidemics during the reign of Emperor Ling, and the epidemic was even worse during the reign of Jin Emperor Xian. Tens of thousands of people were swallowed up by the disease, causing an unprecedented disaster. Zhang Zhongjing's clan was originally a large clan with a population of more than 200 people. Since the first year of Jianan, in less than 10 years, 2/3 of the clan had died from the epidemic. Among them, 7 out of 10 had died from typhoid. Faced with the ravages of the epidemic, Zhang Zhongjing was filled with grief and indignation. Thus, he made up his mind to concentrate on researching the treatment of typhoid. He must subdue this plague. During the Jianan era, Zhang Zhongjing practiced medicine and traveled around the world. He personally witnessed the serious consequences of various epidemics on the common people. He also used this opportunity to put his many years of research on typhoid into practice, further enriching his experience and improving his understanding. After decades of hard work, Zhang Zhongjing finally wrote an immortal work called Treatise on Typhoid and Various Diseases. This was the most influential medical classic after the Yellow Emperor's canon of internal medicine. Zhang Zhongjing's willingness to become an official in the Great Xia dynasty was undoubtedly related to the Great Xia dynasty's widespread reputation. More importantly, it was because the Great Xia dynasty was fully implementing the basic medical reform, which attracted the attention of this medical saint. Zhang Zhongjing was obsessed with medicine and had no nostalgia for officialdom. Because he was born into an aristocratic family, Zhang Zhongjing inherited the family name. During the reign of Emperor Ling of Han, he was elected as a filial minister. During the Jianan era, he was appointed as the governor of Changsha County by the imperial court. Even so, Zhang Zhongjing did not forget to practice medicine. In ancient times, officials could not enter private residences and get close to the common people. But if they did not come into contact with the common people, they could not treat them and their medical skills could not improve. Thereupon, Zhang Zhongjing thought of a way to open the yamen on the 1st and 15th day of every month. He would not interfere with government affairs and would let the sick people come in. He would sit upright in the main hall and carefully treat the sick people one by one. The term doctor in charge originated from this legendary experience of the medical saint, Zhang Zhongjing. Name, Zhang Zhongjing, sage. Title, Medical Saint Dynasty. Eastern Han Dynasty identity. Great Xia Dynasty medical officer, occupation. Special doctor loyalty 70 points root bone, 20 comprehension, 22 charm, 12 fortune, 18 specialties. Medical Saint increases the physical fitness of the people of the dynasty by 15, reduces the probability of the people getting sick by 15, increases the probability of the dynasty's medical research by 15, increases the proficiency of the dynasty's doctors by 25, classic, various types of typhoid, evaluation. Zhang Zhongjing, one of the most outstanding medical scientists in China's history. He wrote the masterpiece, Various Types of Typhoid, which established the principle of syndrome differentiation and treatment. It is the basic principle of clinical Chinese medicine and the soul of Chinese medicine. Chapter 877. After meeting Zhang Zhongjing, Ouyang Shuo considered letting Zhang Zhongjing take up any position. After thinking for a while, Ouyang Shuo said, "The position of the imperial physician is vacant. Would you be willing to take it?" The imperial physician was the chief official of the imperial physician. There were also other positions like the imperial physician and the imperial physician. When the dynasty was established, the divine physician Bian Ke had already been appointed as the imperial physician. Imperial physician? Zhang Zhongjing was obviously hesitant. He was interested in the imperial physician. Ouyang Shuo smiled. He knew why Zhang Zhongjing was hesitating. He said, "Sir, you might have some misunderstandings about the imperial physician. This institution is not a medical institution of the royal family. It is the head of the imperial physician." The entire Xia Palace only had Ouyang Shuo, Song Jia, and Bing'er. Naturally, there was no need to set up a medical institution to provide medical services for the royal family like during the Ming and Qing dynasties. When the Great Xia dynasty was established, Ouyang Shuo had already designated the imperial physician as the imperial physician. The name of the imperial physician originated from the Jin dynasty. It was inherited from the Imperial Physician Bureau and Imperial Physician Bureau of the Tang and Song dynasties. After that, the Imperial Physician Bureau of the Tang and Song dynasties established the Imperial Physician Bureau. The real Imperial Physician Bureau did not only provide medical services for the royal family. Its responsibilities included carrying out the emperor's medical edicts, the recruitment, appointment, and dismissal of doctors, the appointment of medical officers, the medical services of the royal family, the training and education of doctors, and the management of other medical institutions. After listening to the king's explanation, Zhang Zhongjing understood that it was in line with his original intentions. He did not decline anymore. He cupped his hands and said, "Your Majesty, I do not dare to decline your grace." "Thank you, Your Majesty." Ouyang Shuo nodded. With the medical Saint Zhang Zhongjing in the Imperial Physician Bureau, the medical standards of the dynasty would go up another level. As Zhang Zhongjing was officially appointed as the imperial physician, a system announcement spread throughout the China region. System announcement. The representative of the medical school, Zhang Zhongjing, has become an official in the Great Xia dynasty. He is in charge of the Imperial Physician Bureau and has accepted disciples. At the same time, he has fulfilled the 3 requirements for a school to enter. The medical school of the 100 Schools of Thought has officially entered Shanghai City. System announcement. The School of Medicine of the 100 Schools of Philosophers has officially entered Shanghai City. Shanghai City will be given the title of Holy Land of Medicine as a reward. Congratulations to player, don't say you're naked. System announcement. The School of Medicine of the 100 Schools of Thought has officially entered Shanghai City. The current title of the School of Medicine in Shanghai City has been replaced by the title of the Holy Land of the 100 Schools of Thought. The reward for the title of the School of Medicine has been canceled. Shanghai City will be given a special building, the 100 Herb Garden, as a reward. Congratulations to player, don't say you have no clothes. Previously, when merchants settled in, their titles were automatically overwritten. Gaia rewarded them with a hidden building, Silver Wish Tower. This time, Gaia was not as generous and only rewarded them with a special building. Name, Her Garden Type, Special Building Function, increased the growth rate of herbs in the garden by 400 features. Doctor attraction rate increased by 20. Dynasty popularity increased by 5. Description. This is a medicinal garden specially set up to cultivate medicinal herbs. There is a special formation underground, which is nourished by spiritual energy. It has an environment that can support the growth of all kinds of medicinal herbs. It covers an area of 100 acres. This garden was the dream of every doctor. Its value was comparable to the hidden building. This 100-herb garden was not something that Lu Suan's 100-herb garden could compare to. At this moment, a system notification sounded in Ouyang Shua's ears. System notification. Congratulations to player who says that has no clothes. You have obtained a special building, 100-herb garden. Please specify the building location. Friendly reminder. The location cannot be smaller than 100 acres. Ouyang Shua thought for a moment. 100 acres was not small. There was probably no such open space in Shanghai City, so he could only build it outside the city. Ouyang Shua chose a piece of barren land in the eastern suburbs to build the 100-herb garden. System notification. Location selected. Generating. Accompanied by the system notification, a white light flashed in the eastern suburbs. A herb garden that spanned an area of 100 acres appeared out of thin air. Ouyang Shua told Zhang Zhongjing about the 100-herb garden. When Zhang Zhongjing heard that, he was overjoyed. He said with a smile, "The heavens are really helping our dynasty. With such a magical herb garden, we can achieve twice the results with half the effort. Then I'll leave the 100-herb garden to the Imperial Academy of Medicine to manage," Ouyang Shua said with a smile. Zhang Zhongjing cupped his hands and said, "I will definitely not let His Majesty down." After seeing Zhang Zhongjing off, it was already 4 in the afternoon. Only then did Ouyang Shua have time to read through the memorials. Following the establishment of the dynasty, there were naturally more than 3 historical figures who took the initiative to seek refuge in Shanghai City. It was just that the other historical figures were not well known and had already been properly arranged by the cabinet. There was no need for Ouyang Shua to personally make an appearance. Ouyang Shua had just finished reading 5 memorials when someone came to visit. It was Chun Bingguang, the head of the industry department. This humble subject greets His Majesty. Ouyang Shua waved his hand and said, "Old Chun, please sit." When Qingyi saw this, he personally served tea. This time, Chun Bingguang had come for the Shushan Steel Group. Under the lead of the industry department, after nearly 4 months, the Shushan Steel Group had been officially established. The headquarters was set up in Steel City. In Steel City, the construction of 2 large steel mills had also been completed. The 7th Research Institute had set up its first branch in Steel City. It was responsible for the research and development and upgrading of steel-making technology. Under Chun Bingguang's suggestion, even the manufacturing base for the Mimic aircraft was chosen to be in Steel City. In the future, Steel City would no longer be a city of pure steel. Instead, it would be a city of industry. The research and development of new cannons, guns, and steam engines would gradually be moved to Steel City. The industry department had even drawn up plans to build the first railway in Steel City within 2 years to transport iron, ore, and coal to the steel mills. At the same time, the route from Steel City to Shanghai City was being dredged. It was estimated that it would be completed in July. At that time, the good steel produced in Steel City could be continuously transported to Shanghai City through the waterway. The steel group that Ouyang Shua had originally envisioned was gradually taking shape. It would become the engine of the territory's industrialization. But behind the prosperity, there were also hidden worries. Chun Bingguang had come this time because the Shushan Steel Group had encountered trouble. Although it was not fatal, the hidden dangers were not small. Chun Bingguang cupped his hands and said, "Reporting to His Majesty, recently, the coal transported from Hardstone City and West Chu to Royal City has encountered disturbances from unknown warships in the Bohai and Yellow Seas. This has already affected the coal transportation. According to the current trend, in the near future, this transportation route will probably be completely cut off." The dynasty's industrialization was at a critical period. Once the coal supply was cut off, it was bound to suffer a heavy setback. At present, The dynasty not only had the coal from Steel City, but also the newly discovered coal mine in the Minnan province. The coal supply was temporarily fine, but in the long run, this problem had to be solved. Ouyang Shuo frowned and asked, "Have you found out who did it?" According to the investigation of the Navy Command, it is very likely to be the work of the warships of the Yan-Huang Alliance. Ouyang Shuo nodded. He had also guessed so. After receiving Jack's assistance in shipbuilding technology, Di Chun, Zhang Lang, and the others began to build naval fleets one after another. Together with Xiong Ba's naval fleet, the fleets of the three territories were connected in a single line. There is no doubt that they had firmly controlled the Bohai and Yellow Seas. The waters that the Great Xia dynasty's coal ships passed through could not avoid their jurisdiction. After Jack gave the authorization, Ouyang Shuo had already expected such a day. Jack's authorization not only cut the profits of the Great Xia dynasty's shipbuilding industry, but also gave the Great Xia dynasty a few strong opponents on the sea. According to the shipping department, not only the domestic warship orders, but even the ASEAN warship orders were sharply reduced and affected. This meant that the enmity between Jack and the Great Xia dynasty had been formed. If there was a chance, Ouyang Shuo did not mind competing with Jack. After taking down Morocco, if Ouyang Shuo wanted to, he would have the opportunity to enter the American continent. It all depended on how he operated. Of course, if Ouyang Shuo really went all out and broke the rules of the game by blocking the Strait of Gibraltar and cutting off the trade between the United States and the Mediterranean countries, Jack would probably have a reason to intervene in the affairs of the Mediterranean Sea. It was a game of chess between the two, and it all depended on who was better at it. What Ouyang Shuo did not expect was that Di Chun and the others were so impatient, and their methods were so underhanded. According to the intelligence of the Mountain Sea Guards, the naval fleets of Handan City and Blood Red City were still far from being formed. After the system update, Gaia had greatly slowed down the progress of shipbuilding, which inevitably affected their construction of warships. It was not an easy task to build a complete naval fleet. The warships that were harassing the coal ships of the Great Xia dynasty were probably the warships that they had built earlier and were testing them in the relevant waters. As for harassing the coal ships, it was probably just a side goal. Whether it was Di Chun or Zhang Lang, with the help of their families, it was not difficult to hire outstanding modern Navy generals, sailors, captains, and other core talents. All they needed was time to adapt. Ouyang Shuo asked, "Does the industry department have any statistics on the damage to the coal ships?" Chen Bingwang nodded and replied, "Yes." Strangely enough, the ships that suffered the most damage were the coal ships that were sent out from Heartstone City, and they were mainly attacked in the Bohai Sea. They did not encounter any obstructions when they reached the Yellow Sea, and even the Zhoushan fleet of Overlord City turned a blind eye to our coal ships. Ouyang Shuo's eyes flashed, confirming his guess. He did not expose Chen Bingguang, but said after a moment of silence, "I already know about this matter. You can leave first." "Yes." Chen Bingguang bade farewell and left. Since the king already knew about this, he must have a solution. This matter was beyond the capabilities of the industry department, which was why Chen Bingguang had specially rushed over to report. After Chen Bingguang left, Ouyang Shuo looked at Qingyi and said, "Immediately draft a decree for the office of the Grand Herald to send envoys to Handan City, Blood Red City, and Overlord City. Tell them that if they continue to play tricks in the Bohai Sea and Yellow Sea, their merchant ships will not be able to travel on the Grand Line." Ouyang Shuo wanted to give Di Chun and the rest a clear warning. It was better not to break some unspoken rules, otherwise everyone would not be able to get any benefits. "Yes." Qingyi nodded in response. Mobile users, please browse and read for a better reading experience. Chapter 878. Other than giving Di Chun and the rest a clear warning, Ouyang Shuo was also considering other countermeasures. The warning was just a temporary solution. When the fleets of Handan and Blood Red City were fully formed, the coal ships of the Xia dynasty would be at their mercy. This was something Ouyang Shuo would not allow. The fundamental solution was to strengthen the presence of the alliance of mountains and seas in the Bohai and Yellow Seas. The Ezhou fleet could still exert some influence in the Yellow Sea. This was also the reason why the Zhoushan fleet of Tyrant City gave the Xia dynasty a way out. Xiongba did not want to have a direct conflict with the Xia dynasty. The key was the Bohai Sea. The Xia dynasty's navy could not help. The only way was to help Wanshe City build a fleet to fight against the Handan fleet. The Binhai port in the territory of Wanshe City was a large port with the conditions to station a fleet. However, without the support of the Great Xia dynasty, given the current state of Heartstone City, they might not have the ability to build a decent fleet, let alone fight against the Handan fleet. Thinking of this, Ouyang Shuo wrote a letter to Lao Ai to ask for his opinion. If Lao Ai was not determined, Ouyang Shuo could not force him. If Lao Ai was willing, the Xia dynasty would take action. Wanshe City had plenty of coal. At most, they could use coal to make up for it. During dinner, Ouyang Shuo told Song Jia about Wang Zhaojun. Song Jia's reaction was exactly the same as Qingyi's. After a long while, she smiled and said, "You really dare to dream." Ouyang Shuo said, "Do you think it's feasible?" Joking aside, Song Jia immediately became capable when it came to serious matters. She said, "We can try." "That's good. I will not ask about this matter anymore. I will leave it to Madam." Song Jia nodded. The next few days were peaceful. On the 28th of May, the lords of the Mediterranean Sea finally made a move. After a consensus, the lords of the Mediterranean Sea used Queen Kalia as a middleman to convey their willingness to negotiate with the Xia dynasty on the Mediterranean Sea. When Ouyang Shuo received the news, he smiled without saying a word. The reaction of the lords of the Mediterranean Sea was not out of Ouyang Shuo's expectations. Their relationship with the United States was not monolithic. Both sides cooperated with each other and guarded against each other. Caesar and the others were guarding against the Great Xia dynasty as if they were thieves, but unless it was absolutely necessary, they would never allow Jack and the other American feudal lords to have a reason to intervene in the affairs of the Mediterranean Sea. As the saying goes, it's easy to invite a god in, but hard to send him away. Jack and the other American lords were not philanthropists. If they really found a chance to intervene in the affairs of the Mediterranean Sea, it would not be a good thing for the Mediterranean Sea. At the moment, Caesar was the most active in the Mediterranean Sea, actively expanding its right to speak in the Mediterranean Sea, putting on an aggressive posture. Henry kept a low profile the whole time, but he was the most feared. The Spanish lords, led by Cassius, once again suffered a huge setback. They were busy healing their wounds. Fortunately, Cassius was quite decisive. The backbone of the invincible fleet still existed. The Greek lords were busy building a good relationship with the Queen of Kalia and acting as a middleman. The other lords also had their own thoughts, and the entire Mediterranean Sea was in chaos. On the periphery of the Mediterranean Sea, there were also European countries such as Portugal, England, the Netherlands, and Germany. Such a situation was a good opportunity for outsiders to fish in troubled waters. If a big fish like Jack was allowed to enter at this time, who knew what kind of mess he would stir up? It was precisely because of this that at the internal meeting of the Silver Hand, Jack and others proposed to join forces to suppress the Great Xia dynasty's new occupation of Morocco province. It was firmly resisted by the European representatives and was not passed. Therefore, before the situation was completely stiff, Caesar and others still chose to negotiate with the Great Xia dynasty, hoping to come up with a plan that both sides could accept. Ouyang Shuo, who had seen through everything, would not put on airs and immediately agreed to the request of the Mediterranean Sea. For the Great Xia dynasty, there were two purposes for taking Morocco. One was to win a stable logistical supply base for the Mediterranean fleet, and the other was to ensure the smooth flow of the Grand Line. The latter purpose was even higher than the former. Taizu once said, "Seeking unity through struggle will unite, and seeking unity through concession will unite and perish." Ouyang Shuo's series of operations in the Mediterranean Sea this time was based on the above principle, disbanding the Mediterranean Alliance and drawing a clear line with Atlanta City was a retreat in order to advance. Resolutely taking Morocco was a means of struggle to gain bargaining chips for unity. Imagine if the Great Xia dynasty did not take Morocco this time, they would not be able to protect the interests of the Great Xia dynasty's caravans on the Grand Line with just a base city. In the end, they could only be trampled on. At that time, the ocean trade of the Great Xia dynasty would inevitably suffer a heavy setback, and its position as the overlord of the global ocean would also encounter various challenges. The path of the strong would gradually become further and further away. In that way, it would only be the pain of the close ones and the joy of the enemies, and it would not win any sympathy. Therefore, blindly retreating would only cause them to lose all bargaining chips. Now it was different. With the backing of Morocco province, the Great Xia dynasty had the confidence to wrestle with any enemy. Of course, Ouyang Shual was not a reckless person. Unless it was absolutely necessary, he did not want both sides to suffer losses. The road to hegemony had to be plotted slowly. That morning, Ouyang Shual issued an edict. Violet, the deputy of the Chamberlain of Chamberlain, was appointed as the chief envoy, and Su Jinchang, the director of commerce, was appointed as the deputy envoy. From a Chamberlain of Chamberlain, the Ministry of Finance, and the Privy Council, a luxurious negotiation delegation was formed to rush to Atlantis City to negotiate with the Mediterranean lord on navigation and trade. In addition to serving officials, the delegation would also invite real experts in trade, negotiation, diplomacy, and European affairs to form an expert advisory group to accompany them. Before setting off, Violet found Ouyang Shual. As the chief envoy of the negotiation group, Violet naturally had to figure out the bottom line of the Lord's negotiation before setting off. In the Imperial study, Ouyang Shual took the time to meet Violet, who was still so charming and charming. Violet was chosen to be the envoy for two reasons. First, Violet was a player. When it came to communicating with the lords of the Mediterranean Sea, he had a natural advantage over the natives. Second, Violet was an expert in diplomacy and negotiation. Ouyang Shual said with a smile, "The merchant ships of both sides can freely pass through the Grand Line without being disturbed by political, military, and other factors. The trade between each other will not be affected by confrontation. This is the bottom line of this negotiation." At present, Ouyang Shual had no ambition to intervene in the territorial disputes of the Mediterranean Sea. What he expected was still to maintain the normal operation of the Grand Line, nothing more. As for what kind of trade preferential terms you can get from the Mediterranean countries, it depends on the wisdom and efforts of your negotiation team. If a negotiation goes well, I will reward you heavily. Ouyang Shual added with a smile. Violet nodded. Although His Majesty's trump card wasn't too overbearing, and the pressure on the negotiating team's shoulders had lessened significantly, Violet's expression didn't relax at all. This envoy had a great responsibility, and Violet was not a person who did not know the importance of it. Moreover, this was the first time that Violet had taken on such a heavy responsibility. Seeing that Cyan E, Red Eagle, and the other sisters had found their positions in the Great Xia dynasty and were shining again, it would be a lie to say that Violet was not anxious. This envoy was an opportunity for Violet to prove herself. Therefore, before coming to see Ouyang Shual, Violet had done a lot of preparation work and consulted a lot of information files. She had a general understanding of the situation in the Mediterranean Sea. Before the envoy, she had to finalize some key issues with Ouyang Shual. Otherwise, there would be no stabilizing force during the negotiation, and it would be easy to mess up. Violet asked, "What if the other party asks our Mediterranean fleet to withdraw from the Mediterranean Sea?" There was no doubt that this was a sensitive topic. Although the Mediterranean lord agreed to negotiate with the Great Xia dynasty this time, his words had already revealed that he did not want the Mediterranean fleet of the Great Xia dynasty to sail freely in the Mediterranean Sea. To them, the powerful Mediterranean fleet was always a hidden danger. If the Great Xia dynasty did not withdraw the Mediterranean fleet, the Mediterranean lord would not be able to feel at ease. Ouyang Shual looked at Violet approvingly. Violet had grasped the crux of the problem immediately. It seemed that he had made the right decision to appoint Violet as the head envoy for the negotiation. We can solemnly state in the final agreement that the great Xia dynasty will not interfere in the territorial disputes of the countries in the Mediterranean Sea. The Mediterranean fleet will also choose a day to withdraw from the Mediterranean Sea and will only sail in the Atlantic Ocean. At the same time, in order to express our goodwill, we are willing to change the name of the Mediterranean fleet to the Atlantic Fleet, Ouyang Shua said. Violet glanced at Ouyang Shua with an indecipherable look in his eyes. How is this a show of goodwill? It was clearly a greater ambition. The Atlantic Fleet sounded much more domineering than the Mediterranean Fleet. Of course, for the Mediterranean Sea Lord, this was indeed a relief. I understand. Violet nodded again and then asked, "Is there anything else you want to say?" Ouyang Shua said, "I reckon that Spain's Casillas and the others may stir up trouble. You have to be fully prepared. Our attitude toward Spain is neither confrontation nor cooperation. Also, when you reach Atlantis, remember to communicate with Queen Kalia. She is an expert on Mediterranean affairs." Apart from consulting on Mediterranean affairs, Kalia's role was to act as a bridge between the great Xia dynasty and the neutral faction of the Mediterranean Lord as much as possible, as well as to eliminate as much resistance in the negotiations as possible. Therefore, Kalia and her Atlantis city were a super contact. Ouyang Shua had already personally written to Kalia about this matter. She would help. Understood. Ouyang Shua finally said, "Let's leave it at that for now. We will communicate through letters after the negotiation starts. Keep in touch at all times. Remember, you have to be neither servile nor overbearing in this negotiation. If the Mediterranean Lord is not sincere, don't worry. You can immediately terminate the negotiation." Although the possibility of the Mediterranean Lord changing his mind halfway was not high, Ouyang Shua was still prepared for confrontation. With the Morocco province and the help of the teleportation formation, the great Xia dynasty was not afraid of any challenge. Yes. Chapter 879. On the last day of May, the Xia dynasty's negotiation delegation, led by Violet, officially arrived at Atlantis City to begin a round of arduous negotiations. Ouyang Shua, who was in charge of Shanghai City, was not idle either. That morning, Qingyi handed over a booklet that listed the names of nearly 20 guilds. "This is," Ouyang Shua asked. Qingyi said, "Your Majesty, this is the list of guilds in the China region that want to take over the rights to guard the satellite town of Labat. They are all here from all 9 royal cities." Since the news of the Xia dynasty's capture of Morocco spread, the satellite town outside of Labat City had attracted the attention of countless guild leaders in the China region. Although there were 9 royal cities in the China region, there were too many monks and not enough gruel. There were many large guilds that did not take over the rights to guard the city. Knowing that the satellite town of Labat was still an empty city, there were naturally people who were tempted. In the game, the players did not care much about the region. It was the same no matter where they explored the underground world. Therefore, the satellite town of Labat had a great attraction to the guilds. Since Ouyang Shua returned to Shanghai City, there was an endless stream of guild leaders who came to visit him. However, they were all blocked outside the Xia Palace and were received by Qingyi, a scholar from the secret literature pavilion. Ouyang Shua did not refuse to meet them because he wanted to put on airs. This was because among the guild leaders who came to visit, there were many who were related to him. For example, guilds that were on good terms with Snow Rose and the original Breeze Pavilion, or people who were familiar with Ouyang Shua and Songjia in real life. Most of them were his classmates. Until today, Ouyang Shua's real identity was already an open secret. The students who did not know the truth were shocked and excited at the same time. It was normal for them to want to get some benefits from the Xia dynasty. Ouyang Shua even saw the name of Liangshan mercenary group on the list. It seemed that Ouyang Shua's act of gifting the sword gave Song Pu some unnecessary thoughts, but Song Pu was overthinking. In order to avoid suspicion, Ouyang Shua simply refused to meet them. Unexpectedly, Ouyang Shua's refusal to meet them aroused the interest of the other guild leaders. In the eyes of these big shots, Emperor Xia refused to meet them. Naturally, he wanted to be impartial and not biased. Therefore, in the past week, the number of guilds that felt that they were qualified had reached more than 20. Today, almost all the guilds with the same idea had submitted their applications. That was why Cyan Gown had gathered the name list and handed it over to Ouyang Shua to decide. Ouyang Shua glanced at the name list and immediately understood. Then, he said with a smile, "Dream on." Could it be that His Majesty doesn't intend to arrange for the China region's guilds to be stationed in the satellite city? Cyan was puzzled. Ouyang Shua shook his head and said, "We naturally have to make arrangements. But which one, or which few? By what standards? We can't let them take advantage of such a huge satellite city." Ouyang Shua was very wary of other guilds after the change of banner of the Tingyu Tower and other guilds. Who knew which guild had a hidden pawn of the silver hand? Ouyang Shua wouldn't be at ease if he didn't have a thorough understanding of the guild. However, only Snow Rose and Baleful Blood Mercenary Group could be considered as allies of the Great Xia dynasty. However, they were the guardian guilds of their respective royal cities. As for those classmates and friends, Ouyang Shua didn't believe them at all. If Ouyang Shua had any brothers or sisters, even if they were cousins, things would be easy to solve. Putting bloodline clans in important positions was also an important way to maintain the rule of the dynasty. Unfortunately, there wasn't. "Your Majesty, what do you mean?" Ouyang Shua thought for a moment and said, "Let the Mountain Sea Guard check first and eliminate the guilds that may have been infiltrated by the Silver Hand. Then, we'll bid from the remaining guilds." Although the Guardian guilds were not only a huge threat to the Maroka province, they had to be guarded against. Cyan Gown was startled. He thought for a moment and said, "Your Majesty, are you talking about bidding?" After staying by Ouyang Shua's side for a long time, Cyan Gown could already understand Ouyang Shua's unconstrained ideas. "Yes." Ouyang Shua smiled and said, "Let's use the Guardian of Rabat's satellite city as the target. The bidding conditions include a commission of more than 3 million gold coins, more than 5% of the guild shares, and more than 5% of the tax revenue of the satellite city. The one who gives the best comprehensive conditions will win the bid." Understood. Cyan Gown knew that the king wanted to take the opportunity to make a fortune. Ouyang Shua had a clear conscience. Since he could not differentiate between friend and foe, then the highest bidder would win. With this amount of money, he could barely cover the expenses of the attack on Maroka. Just to restore Rabat City, Ouyang Shua spent 1 million gold coins, including the military expenses, the purchase of war materials, war losses, post-war compensation, military reorganization, and so on. 3 million gold coins were still not enough. Fortunately, other than this amount of money, after taking down Rabat, he plundered a large amount of gold, silver, jewelry, armors, and weapons for the palace treasury and the royal city treasury. Preliminary estimates showed that the total value was no less than 2 million gold coins. In addition, Ouyang Shua found a substitute doll and a king-level summoning talisman in the palace treasury. Both were priceless items. After the war, the Xia dynasty did not make a loss. Under Song Jia's strong request, Ouyang Shua kept the substitute doll by his side. In Song Jia's words, "You are Emperor Xia now. You can't be willful anymore. Your first priority is to stay alive." Ouyang Shua was helpless, but he had to obey. When he was in the satellite town, Tita's sneak attack made Ouyang Shua realize that he was starting to cherish his life. Now that he was carrying the substitute doll, he did not know if it was a good or bad thing. Ouyang Shua needed to understand and break through the crux of the matter. Others could help. As for the king-level summoning talisman, Ouyang Shua did not use it. Instead, he gave it to the Siege Lion. It was to thank the Siege Lion for giving him the limited summoning card. Without that card, the Xia dynasty's road to building a nation would be bumpy. Ouyang Shua hated owing favors the most. After he regained his senses, Ouyang Shua said to Qingyi, "Let the commercial office handle the bidding. They should have accumulated some experience in bidding." "Yes." Ouyang Shua said, since we were talking about the satellite town, let's handle the immigration of Morocco province as well. Please advise, Your Majesty. Qingyi had already prepared a brush and ink to record it down. Many of the dynasty's policies were spoken by Ouyang Shua. He said whatever came to mind. This required the secret text pavilion to organize it. Thus, Qingyi had already developed the habit of recording. Ouyang Shua said, the number of players migrating to Morocco province, excluding the satellite town, is tentatively set at 1 million. Life profession players and casual players will still be the majority. Casablanca is still very attractive to casual players. Thus, we can increase the number of casual players to 600,000. Casablanca was a garden city and a holiday destination. It was very attractive to casual players. It was one of the best cities to retire. Even if the Great Xia dynasty did not provide them with social security, there would still be elderly people who would be willing to settle down in Casablanca. There were many wealthy people among the elderly. Not all of them were poor. Casablanca's tourism industry had great potential. Speaking of which, he really had to thank the previous leader, Carolyn, for managing Casablanca so well. Other than the players, transfer 200,000 natives from the various provinces to migrate to Morocco province. Correspondingly, 200,000 natives can be relocated from Morocco province to settle down in the domestic province. Ouyang Shua continued. The purpose of the cross-migration was naturally to dilute the Arab atmosphere in Morocco province and completely integrate the province into the Great Xia dynasty system. This way, they would not be at odds with the central government. Coupled with the unique characteristics of the dynasty, the refugees in the cities of Morocco province would all be Han Chinese. In a year or two, the complete transformation of Morocco province would be completed. At that time, Morocco province will be no different from the other provinces. Naturally, the cross-migration had a price to pay. Just the cost of settling down the two sides would be a huge expenditure. The entire implementation would probably cost millions of gold coins. In addition to the cost of settling down the players, the expenditure would be even greater. Ouyang Shua pondered for a moment before saying, after the bidding for the satellite town's guild qualification, keep 1 million gold coins from the commission for the resettlement of the migrants. The remaining funds will be settled by the finance department. Stabilizing Morocco province was a huge boon for the dynasty's finances. At this moment, the finance minister, Fan Li, would probably not obstruct them with an advance payment. When Qingyi heard this, she noted it down. Should we imitate the Star State County and auction off the surrounding islands of Morocco province? Qingyi suggested. Ouyang Shua shook his head and said, no need. Morocco province is different from the Star State County. There are no countries in the vicinity that would interest the PK maniacs of the China region. Furthermore, the surrounding islands need to be built into a fixed naval supply base. It's not suitable to be auctioned off. Let's not be greedy for this sum of money. Qingyi frowned and said, if we build a base, it will be another expenditure. Ouyang Shua smiled and said, that can't be helped. Morocco province is surrounded by powerful enemies. If we don't do this, we won't be able to rest easy. I made a rough calculation. With 5 million gold coins, it's basically enough to fill the holes in the war and get Morocco province back on the right track. If it's just a little less, rather than having designs on the islands, it's better to let the Commerce Department do a better job and squeeze out more commission. I will pass on the king's intentions to the Commerce Department. Qingyi had experienced the king's greed. He really wanted to squeeze the guild dry. Ouyang Shua nodded and said, then let's do this for now. In just half an hour, Ouyang Shua had decided on the general direction of Morocco province. On the 1st of June, once the news of the Great Xia dynasty bidding for the satellite town's guild qualification was announced, it naturally caused another round of heated discussion. There were those who called out the Great Xia dynasty for being black-hearted, while there were those who were eager to make a move. The intelligent guild leaders had already thought of the Blood Shadow Alliance, a strategy of restructuring. Using an alliance to participate in the bidding was obviously more advantageous than fighting alone and had a higher chance of success. Chapter 880. The China region, which had just calmed down, was once again stirred up by the great Xia dynasty's recruitment and bidding announcements. Ouyang Shaw, the initiator, was in no mood to care. Because on the 1st of June, Jinan County Chief Mu Lanyue finally arrived at Shanghai City. Even when she saw Ouyang Shuo, she still did not know why she was summoned to the capital. Brother King. In the imperial study, Mu Lanyue bowed gracefully. Among the officials of the dynasty, Mu Lanyue was the only one who could address Ouyang Shuo as such. Sit. Ouyang Shuo smiled and looked at the girl in front of him. In just a few years, the innocent girl he had met had completely grown up. She was radiating a dazzling light. Although the two of them spent more time apart than together, they were not siblings, but they were more like siblings. Mu Lanyue's parents had already left the Mars base and were on their way to Hope Planet. After chatting for a while, Ouyang Shuo got to the point. Do you want a change of environment? Mu Lanyue was startled. She rolled her eyes and said, Brother King, you want me to work in the capital? That's good. Mu Lanyue was naturally happy to see Ouyang Shuo often. Ever since she became the Jinan County Chief, the court had a rule that local officials were not allowed to leave their territory without an imperial summons. Otherwise, it would be a crime of disrespect. Therefore, Mu Lanyue rarely had the opportunity to return to Shanghai City. Mu Lanyue's question was not baseless. As a senior county chief, Mu Lanyue was not completely ignorant of the news in the court. There is a rumor in the court that the cabinet intended to have a round of overlapping appointments between local officials and court officials. Some local officials will be transferred back to the court, while some court officials will be sent to the local government offices to gain experience. This kind of overlapping appointment was beneficial to the dynasty. If the court was a pool of stagnant water, it would be terrifying. As for whether the cabinet had the intention of the king, outsiders did not know. Ouyang Shuo smiled and said, You are well informed. He paused and continued. This time, I did not summon you to work in the capital. I hope you will be the governor of Morocco province. Are you willing to share my burden? Mu Lanyue's eyes widened. It was clear that she was not mentally prepared at all. After a while, she said hesitantly, I am willing to go to Morocco to work, but as the governor, I'm afraid I can't do it, right? Sister Baiwa hasn't even become the governor yet. Hearing this, Qing Yi glanced at Ouyang Shuo intentionally or unintentionally. Ouyang Shuo smiled and said, You don't have to worry about anything. Baiwa has his own arrangements. The Morocco province was isolated overseas and needed a trustworthy person to oversee it. I've thought about it, and I think you're the most suitable. When Mu Lanyue heard this, a sweet smile flashed in her eyes. Even so, she was still not confident enough. She said, Let me think about it. Ouyang Shuo waved his hand forcefully and said, What are you thinking about? Don't worry, I won't let you fight alone. Do you know the Zhaoqing prefectural governor, Du Sijing? I'm preparing to transfer Du Sijing to the position of Morocco province's director of administration. With Du Sijing's assistance, you don't have to worry. In addition, the officials of Jinan County are also at your disposal. Ouyang Shuo was extremely fond of Mu Lanyue for being able to take along her subordinates when transferring. Mu Lanyue was filled with gratitude. She knew that her brother intended to nurture her. After thinking for a moment, she finally made up her mind and said, Since brother trusts me, then I'll give it a try. Good. This is the Yu I know. It's settled then. Ouyang Shuo made his decision. Emachum. Mu Lanyue nodded solemnly. She made up her mind to govern the Morocco province well so that she wouldn't let down her brother's kindness. Ouyang Shuo continued, Pack up and head to the Morocco province. I'll have Pavilion Elder Jiang accompany you. Labat City and Shanghai City have a teleportation array. When you're free, I'll pardon you and allow you to return to Shanghai City to relax. Thank you, Brother King, for your grace. Mu Lanyue stood up and bowed respectfully. That afternoon, Mu Lanyue went to the Morocco province accompanied by the cabinet chief Jiang Shan. At the same time, Mu Lanyue and Du Sijing's appointment orders were sent to the various prefectures of the province. According to the imperial court system, the governor was a third-rank official, while the prefectural governor was only a fifth-rank official. Mu Lanyue's promotion was equivalent to a 5-rank promotion. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that she was riding a rocket. For a moment, there were those who admired her, those who were jealous, and those who secretly criticized her. Even Bai Hua couldn't help but feel a ripple in his heart. Mu Lanyue, the first governor of the dynasty, had become a supernova in the imperial court, shining brightly. Fortunately, the Morocco province was isolated and unknown. Although there were ripples, it wasn't enough to cause any big waves. If Mu Lanyue had been appointed as the governor of the South Sichuan province, it would have been very difficult for her to pass the appointment. At the very least, she wouldn't have been able to pass the cabinet. After sending Mu Lanyue off, Ouyang Shua immediately sent a letter to Ko Juan, who was in charge of the administrative affairs of the Morocco province. He stated that he would listen to Mu Lanyue's opinion on the appointment of officials in the Morocco province. The two of them discussed this matter together, which was also a sign of respect for Mu Lanyue. With Ko Juan's political wisdom, he would definitely understand Ouyang Shua's good intentions. After everything was settled, it was already 3 in the afternoon. Although it was still early, Ouyang Shua was preparing to get off work. Today was Children's Day. Although Bing had grown up to be a young girl, she was still at the age to celebrate Children's Day. Early in the morning, Bing pestered Ouyang Shua, saying that there was a new food street in the city and wanted her brother to accompany her to play in the afternoon. The little girl said this just to find an excuse for her brother to accompany her. When Ouyang Shua heard this, he couldn't refuse. Ever since he entered the game, apart from the beginning, Ouyang Shua had been busy nonstop. He rarely had time to accompany Bing alone. Thinking about it, he felt a little guilty. Therefore, in the afternoon, Ouyang Shua asked Xingyi to reject all summons and get off work early. When he returned to the harem, Bing was already waiting. When she saw that Ouyang Shua had returned early, she immediately smiled. Ouyang Shua said, "Wait a moment, Big Brother will go change clothes." Since he was accompanying Bing to go shopping, Ouyang Shua didn't want to be too eye-catching, so he changed into a set of casual clothes. The accompanying guards naturally had to change into casual clothes, otherwise they would still be too eye-catching. Even Bing put on a little bit of a disguise. Otherwise, with Bing-er's reputation in the city, it would be hard for her not to be recognized. After a short while, after changing their clothes, the group quietly left the summer palace. Walking on the bustling street, Ouyang Shua and his group looked like a young master taking a trip with his mistress and servants. In the bustling city, this kind of arrangement could be seen everywhere. The food street that Bing mentioned was located in the West District, not far from the capital. It was said that this food street was built by a player merchant. He claimed to have gathered hundreds of special delicacies from all over the world. Even overseas delicacies could be tasted here. This was a capable person. He must have borrowed the creativity of the food street in real life. Shanghai City was truly a place where 100 flowers bloomed and 100 schools of thought contended. With an inclusive attitude, all kinds of new things appeared continuously, attacking the senses of the natives and breaking the old system time and time again. Although it was afternoon, the food street was already very lively. There was an endless stream of pedestrians. With the special permission of Shanghai City's government office, carriages were prohibited from entering the food street. Regardless of whether they were officials, nobles, or commoners, they could only walk when entering the food street. If it was in the system's royal city, this would be unimaginable. However, in Shanghai City, both the natives and the government officials were used to this. Ouyang Shua looked around. The food street's advertisement was true. What he saw were all kinds of special delicacies from all over the world. Tianjin pancake fruit pancake, Northeast dumpling soup, Beijing fried liver, Hunan spicy soup, Sichuan hot and sour noodles, Jiangsu soup dumplings, Lingnan noodles, Guilin rice noodles, Lantau beef ramen, Chongqing noodles, and so on. This scene reminded Ouyang Shua of the scene where he and his sister went shopping for New Year's goods in real life. He was really emotional. Although only 3 years had passed, it felt like a lifetime. Bing begged Ouyang Shua to come here because she missed him. The little girl has really grown up, Ouyang Shua thought to himself. Perhaps it was a coincidence. Just as Ouyang Shuo was feeling emotional, two women dressed like swordsmen walked toward him. They were holding barbecued skewers in their hands and eating them without a care for their image. Looking closely, it was Ouyang Shuo's middle school classmates, Tan Xiaoli and Meng Feifei. 3 years ago, at the Jiaozhou New Year's market, Ouyang Shuo had brought Bang to buy New Year's goods and met them by chance. The passage of time was truly unfathomable. Ouyang Shuo didn't know that the usually quiet Meng Feifei had a time when she didn't care about her image. The temptation of delicious food was something even a young girl couldn't resist. The two of them naturally saw Ouyang Shuo's group and immediately recognized them. Tan Xiaoli was about to greet them, but before she could finish, Meng Feifei pinched her and immediately came to her senses. It was obvious that if Ouyang Shuo's identity was exposed, it would cause a huge wave. Ouyang Shuo smiled and said, "What a coincidence. Why, do you want to sit inside?" As he spoke, he pointed to the Chongqing noodle shop on the left. "Sure." Meng Feifei took the initiative to reply this time. Seeing Ouyang Shuo looking at the barbecued skewers in her hands, she felt embarrassed and put her hands behind her back. What a shy girl. As they spoke, the group had already entered the noodle shop. "Dear customers, please come in. Would you like to stay in the main hall or a private room?" The waiter saw that Ouyang Shuo's group had an extraordinary bearing and didn't dare to neglect them. Ouyang Shuo said, "Find us a private room on the second floor." "All right." The waiter was full of smiles as he led the way in front. Although it was inappropriate to sit in a private room in the noodle shop, they were too ostentatious. Ouyang Shuo was worried that they would be recognized if they sat in the main hall for too long. Now that he saw Meng Feifei and Tan Xiaoli, Ouyang Shuo was suddenly interested and wanted to have a good chat with these two old friends. Ever since he had ascended to a high position, Ouyang Shuo had been separated from the masses for too long. Chapter 882. Ouyang Shuo didn't immediately agree to Lu Su's suggestion because he had other plans. Ouyang Shuo planned to use the first batch of Z-1 warships as the framework to form a personal guard fleet, temporarily named the Royal Fleet, similar to the Imperial Guards in the army. In the future, there would be frequent kingdom wars, and Ouyang Shuo would often have to go out to sea. He would need a standing fleet by his side, and he wouldn't be able to transfer battleships from the 5 fleets every time he went out to sea. It would be truly inconvenient. Therefore, there was no need for the Royal Fleet to have a full complement of 5 formations. For now, 1 formation was enough. However, the Royal Fleet needed to be equipped with the strongest Marine Corps to replace the role of the Imperial Guards. He couldn't say that Ouyang Shuo had to bring the Imperial Guards with him every time he went out to sea, which was extremely inconvenient. During the voyage last year, the fleet that had been temporarily formed was the predecessor of the Royal Navy. It just so happened that the Southern Border Fleet had already withdrawn from the North Bay, and the Royal Fleet was stationed at the North Seaport. After listening to the king's plan, he took the lead to express his support and said, "The king is the ruler of a country. In the Navy, there is indeed a need for such a fleet to protect the king and demonstrate the majesty of the Celestial Empire. The establishment of the Royal Fleet would definitely improve the status of the Navy in the army of the dynasty." As the commander-in-chief of the Navy, he was naturally happy to see it happen, so he took the lead to express his opinion. "We second the motion." The ministers present were naturally tactful and nodded in agreement. After all, the Royal Fleet was only a single formation, so it was not too much of a burden to the dynasty. Since that was the case, how could the ministers oppose it? Moreover, it was a fact that the king often went out to sea. Equipping such a fleet was also to maintain the face of the dynasty, and it was a big matter. Ouyang Shuo nodded. He looked at Lu Su again and said, "Of course, Zijing's proposal is also reasonable. In this king's opinion, it will be better to work on both fronts and complete the establishment of the Royal Fleet before October. The vacated tower ships can be transferred to the Coastal Fleet one after another, so that they can take shape as soon as possible." "Yes, sir." Before he left, he asked cautiously, "Does your majesty have any candidates for the Royal Navy Admiral in mind?" Ouyang Shuo waved his hand and said, "The command center will first draw up a detailed reorganization plan, and the command center can take the lead in forming the fleet. As for the Navy Admiral, we'll discuss it later." Among the commanders of the 5 fleets, there was no one that Ouyang Shuo was very fond of. "Yes, sir." Once all matters had been discussed, the court was dismissed. Not long after Ouyang Shuo returned to the imperial study, before he could even warm his seat, the Office of Transmission responsible for delivering official documents hurriedly walked in. "Why are you in such a panic?" Ouyang Shuo frowned. The Minister of Communication did not dare to be negligent. He held a secret letter with both hands, bowed and said, "Your Majesty, Gu Xiuwen, the city guard of Friendship City, has just sent over an urgent letter, marked as extremely urgent." "What?" Ouyang Shuo stood up. According to the rules, unless it was a matter of life and death, the local officials could not issue an extremely urgent document. "Bring it over quickly." "Yes, sir." Ouyang Shuo received the secret letter and opened it on the spot. The more he read, the more unsightly his expression became. Never had he imagined that something would happen to Friendship City at this time. If one were to trace the source, one would have to start from the ocean voyage last year. Last June, Ouyang Shuo arrived in Somalia with his fleet and stopped at the port of Berbera. On the same night, he encountered a well-planned assassination. Fortunately, Ouyang Shuo was lucky and escaped the calamity. In Somalia, Ouyang Shuo led the fleet and defeated the 3 largest pirate groups in Somalia. He also exposed the true colors of Farah, the leader of the largest guild in Somalia, the Cheetah mercenary team. With this achievement, Ouyang Shuo was conferred a title by the Somali royal family and was able to establish Friendship City in Somalia. This gave his territory a foothold in the Gulf of Aden, and he enjoyed a lot of glory. On the contrary, Farah, who had lost the war and was a sinner of Somalia, became the leader of the serious pirate team and lurked in the waters around the Gulf of Aden. This lay dormant for nearly a year. Unexpectedly, under Farah's leadership, the serious pirate team not only recovered, but they also swallowed the other 2 pirate groups. Their strength increased greatly, and they became the most powerful existence in the Gulf of Aden. Farah himself was known as the Pirate King. Ouyang Shuo did not expect that his soft-heartedness back then had led to his own demise. Naturally, Farah hated Ouyang Shuo to the core. That morning, the serious pirate team suddenly launched an attack on Friendship City while the Mediterranean Fleet's 5th Fleet was still in the base city. Caught off guard, the brave harbor outside of Friendship City fell, and hundreds of merchant ships docked there were looted and suffered heavy losses. When Gu Xiuwen sent the letter, more than 60,000 vicious pirates had already attacked the outer city of Friendship City and started a monstrous massacre in the city. The commercial city was in the middle of a war. The Friendship City Guard Division was defeated and had already retreated to the inner city. They planned to rely on the defenses in the inner city to deal with the pirates until reinforcements arrived. Under such circumstances, Gu Xiuwen, the mayor of Friendship City, sent an urgent secret message. Strangely enough, when the Mediterranean Fleet's 5th Fleet was stationed in the Gulf of Aden, they did not see the serious pirate team. This was what they meant by saying that a cat had its way and a dog had its way. As local tyrants, if the pirates really wanted to hide, no one would be able to find them. However, the serious pirate team did not leave any traces, and it was too unusual. Ouyang Shuo guessed that there must be something strange about this, but it was not the time to think about it now. "Guard, here!" Su Chu walked in. Ouyang Shuo's expression was cold, but he was very calm inside. He had seen all kinds of storms in the past few years. He said, "Order the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd Divisions of the Monolith Army to gather at the teleportation formation and follow me to reinforce Friendship City." The Monolith Army was the 1st Division of the Imperial Guard stationed in the capital, and it was a pure mountain barbarian heavy infantry division. "Yes, sir." The mountain barbarian soldiers were more suitable for fighting in the city. Currently, the 2nd and 3rd Imperial Guards were stationed in the capital, so they could mobilize the Monolith Army. Moreover, the Monolith Army had been stationed in the capital for a long time, so they could not fight all day. In less than half an hour, Ouyang Shuo arrived at the teleportation formation under the escort of his personal guards. Jia, Su, Qingyi, and the others did not come with him. The situation was urgent, so there was no need to bring too many people. At the same time, the 3 divisions of the Divine Martial Guards and the Monolith Army had also arrived. They were led by Deputy Commander Shihu. Shihu's eyes were overflowing with battle intent. He had not been on a battlefield for a long time, so his men were very stifled. Seeing this, Ouyang Shuo nodded in satisfaction. From the rapid gathering of the Monolith Army, although the army was stationed in the capital, the soldiers did not slack off and were ready to go on the battlefield at any time. Let's go. Ouyang Shuo did not waste any time and entered the teleportation formation first. With a flash of white light, Ouyang Shuo appeared in Friendship City. As soon as he walked out of the teleportation formation, Ouyang Shuo heard the sounds of fighting coming from not far away. The sounds of ordinary people running for help could also be heard. The pirates were not like the regular army. Even if they were besieging the city, there was no saying that they did not disturb the people. The people in the city were going to suffer a great crime. Ouyang Shuo raised his head and saw that the outer city and the port in the distance were filled with smoke. Needless to say, it was definitely the black-hearted pirates who had started the fire. Arson, murder, and plunder, they really did all kinds of evil. Pharaoh was venting his hatred towards Ouyang Shuo on the Friendship City. This time, Friendship City had really suffered a huge setback. Near the teleportation formation, Gu Xiuan was already waiting with a group of officials. When he saw the king, he immediately bowed and said sincerely, "Your humble servant greets your majesty. The Friendship City has been attacked, and the outer city has fallen. Your humble servant cannot escape the blame. Please punish me, your majesty." Ouyang Shuo waved his hand and said, "Now is not the time to talk about this. Let's beat back the pirates first." Yes. Seeing this, Gu Xiuan retreated to the side. Another half an hour passed, and the 40,000 soldiers of the Monolith Army were all teleported over. In just this short period of time, the guards of the inner city had met with danger again and again. Fortunately, the pirates had not managed to break through. Logically speaking, the guards of the Friendship City were not pushovers. Seeing that they had been beaten to such a sorry state, it could be seen that Pharaoh was indeed capable of training a group of pirates to be so ferocious. Ouyang Shuo did not panic and said to Shihu, "Immediately take your men and go up and teach these pirates a lesson. Let them know the consequences of invading the Great Xia dynasty." Although Friendship City had opened the teleportation formation, it was not open to the public. At this moment, Pharaoh probably did not know that the reinforcements of the Great Xia dynasty had already arrived. Otherwise, Pharaoh would not dare to attack Friendship City even if he was given more guts. Yes, Ouyang Shuo continued to instruct. Remember, don't just rush up. First, send a group of people to block all the city gates. Close the gates and beat the dogs. I want these pirates to not be able to return. In front of the Monolith Army, no matter how well-trained the pirates were, they were still useless. This time, Ouyang Shuo was going to be ruthless. He would rather destroy the outer city in order to catch all of these pirates in one fell swoop. Rest assured, your majesty, I will accept the punishment for letting one pirate escape. Shihu issued a military order and left with his troops in a grandiose manner. Ouyang Shuo looked at Su Chu and said, "Take the Divine Martial Guards and go around to the port outside the city. See if you can capture the pirate leader Pharaoh alive." According to Gu Xiuan, Pharaoh was very cunning and had not entered the city yet. Understood. Su Chu grinned and left with the 3,000 Divine Martial Guards. In front of the Monolith Army, the pirates were still useless. But in front of the Divine Martial Guards, the pirates were not even comparable to chickens and ducks. Therefore, Su Chu was confident that he could move unimpeded in the enemy's formation. With a whoosh, only 200 personal guard were left in the same place. After giving the military order, Ouyang Shuo looked at Gu Xiuan with a smile on his face. He waved his hand and said, "Let's go." Bring me to the mayor's mansion. His Majesty was so calm, coupled with the sounds of killing not far away. It was truly admirable. Gu Xiuwen felt ashamed. Compared to His Majesty, he was still not calm enough. After calming himself down, Gu Xiuwen said respectfully, "Your Majesty, please." Chapter 883. Just as Ouyang Shuo and his party arrived at the Friendship City, a conversation was taking place in the Somali King's king and his subordinate military minister in the Somali King's palace. The Somali King played with a string of agates in his hand, and the meaning in his eyes was unclear as he said, "The serious pirate group should have attacked Friendship City by now, right?" The military minister smiled apologetically and said, "I just received news that they have already broken into the outer city. Is that so? Farah does have some skills." After a pause, the Somali king suddenly asked, "What about the Great Xia dynasty? Have reinforcements arrived?" "There's no news yet, but with the reaction speed of the Great Xia dynasty, they'll definitely be able to send reinforcements." The Somali king nodded, and the smile on his face grew wider. Seeing this, the military minister said flatteringly, "Your Majesty is wise to not tell Farah about the teleportation formation in the Friendship City. In this way, be it the Heavenly Wolf Pirates who take over Friendship City or the Great Xia Dynasty who annihilates the Heavenly Wolf Pirates, it will be beneficial to us." Ha! The King of Somalia laughed heartily. Friendship City, City Lord Residence. Ouyang Shuo leisurely entered the City Lord's mansion and sat in the rear with a calm expression. The front line was in a fierce battle. Friendship City was located in a basin, surrounded by mountains on 3 sides and the sea on 1 side. Bao led the Monolith Army's 3rd Division out of the southern city gate, and along the small path between the city wall and the foot of the basin, they headed north. After marching at a rapid pace, it took them less than half an hour to successfully take down the east and west city gates. Bao left half of his troops to guard the 2 city gates, while the rest of his troops continued to head north. They launched a pincer attack from both sides, heading straight for the northern city gate. When he passed by the Brave Port, he was finally noticed by the pirates outside the city. Pharaoh was cunning and cherished his life very much. Even though he had already invaded the outer city, he still arranged nearly 10,000 pirates to stay at the port outside the city, ready to retreat at any time. As for Farah himself, he didn't even leave the ship. He was still on the pirate ship at the port. The moment they saw the Stone Leopard tribe, the pirates guarding outside the city thought that they were the garrison division. They couldn't help but mock. "Hey, look at this group of soldiers. Don't tell me they are so scared that they want to escape by ship. It must be. What a bunch of cowards. Let's go, brothers. Don't let them escape." Boss said that today, Friendship City will be bathed in blood. Blood bathed Friendship City. The pirates clamored as they surrounded him. The ignorant were truly fearless. Su Chu, who was traveling with the Stone Leopard tribe, grinned and said to the Stone Leopard tribe, "General Sure, go and seal the north gate. Leave these small fries to us." "Thank you." Sure Bao knew the combat power of the Divine Martial Guard, so he didn't stand on ceremony. After cupping his fists, he led his troops away. Su Chu held a saber horizontally and uttered a word, "Kill! Kill!" 3,000 godly guards pulled out the T1 Tang, sword from their waists, and charged. Only then did the pirate notice something strange. He muttered to himself, "Something's not right. Are they here to die? Who cares? Let's kill it first. Not bad. It's good that you're here. Let's kill him to our heart's content." Kill. The successive victories had already clouded the minds of this group of pirates. They were so inflated that they didn't even know what their surnames were. In an instant, the 2 groups of people were fighting at close quarters. As soon as they made contact, the pirates were filled with regret. They knew that they had kicked an iron plate this time. Compared to the guards, the enemies in front of them were far too savage. Every time their saber fell, heads would fall to the ground. When it came to killing people, they were much more savage than these pirates. On the other hand, the pirates' counterattack was comical. It was a very fierce attack, but they couldn't even get close to the enemy. The enemy soldiers were all as slippery as loaches. He didn't know that the soldiers of the Divine Martial Guard were all skilled, and their movement techniques were naturally exceptional. In less than half an hour, the 10,000 pirates were utterly defeated under the attack of the Divine Martial Guard. They all covered their heads and fled like rats, crying for their parents. It was an indescribable wretchedness and misery. Some clever pirates had already quietly retreated to the port and were ready to leave by ship. The pirates were depressed, and Su Chu was also in a dilemma. Finishing off the small fries in front of him wasn't much of a contribution to the Divine Martial Guard. Su Chu wanted the big fish, the pirate leader that the king spoke of. But as far as the eye could see, the huge port was filled with pirates, but there was no one who looked like the leader. Seeing that some pirates were about to escape by ship, Su Chu panicked. Su Chu turned his saber and knocked with the back of the saber, subduing a pirate and almost knocking him out. Using his left hand as thick as a thigh, he grabbed the other's collar and shouted, "Speak! Where is your leader?" That pirate was also quite pitiful. He was already dizzy from encountering a fiend like Su Chu. Frightened by Su Chu's loud voice, his body trembled. He didn't dare to hesitate and quickly said, "The leader is still on the ship." "What?" Su Chu was furious. He pushed out with his left hand, and the pirate fell to the ground. He did not dare to stay any longer. He rolled and crawled, staggered, and ran far away. He was in an extremely sorry state. He didn't dare to stay in this godforsaken place any longer. Su Chu naturally didn't mind a small fish. He looked at the port not far away and saw many merchant ships on fire. Thick smoke billowed, and it looked like they couldn't be saved. There were many merchants on the shore, looking at the burning merchant ships. They wanted to cry, but had no tears. The most eye-catching thing on the surface of the sea were the pirate ships that were coming one after another. In the middle of the pirate ships, there was a huge sailboat that was very eye-catching. It must be the flagship of the pirate group. Unfortunately, the Divine Guards didn't know how to sail a ship, so they couldn't do anything. The depressed Su Chu could only vent his anger on the pirates on the shore. For a moment, there were wails and howls. While Su Chu was looking at the sea, Farah, who was on the ship, was also paying attention to the movements on the shore. The battle scene that appeared through the binoculars made Farah's heart go cold, and the uneasiness in his heart became more and more intense. When he saw the attire of the Divine Guards, Farah was completely chilled. A year ago in Somalia, Farah had seen the Divine Guards before, so he recognized them at a glance. The Divine Guards of the Great Xia dynasty suddenly appeared in Friendship City, and the meaning was obvious. F***, I've been tricked. Farah was exasperated. The Heavenly Wolf Pirate Group was naturally the local snake in the sea, but they were in the dark when they came ashore. Under the intentional concealment of Friendship City, Farah didn't have the ability to find out about the teleportation array. One careless move, and the whole game would be lost. Farah was also a rather decisive person. He knew that he couldn't stay any longer and had to leave immediately. However, when he thought of his hard work for a year and the family business that he had painstakingly saved up would be gone in a day, Farah's heart bled. Friendship City, I will be back. Farah's eyes were red. He gritted his teeth and immediately set sail, taking the gold, silver, and jewelry that he had plundered this time and was the first to escape. As for the old scores with the Somali royal family, he had to escape this disaster first. Su Chu, who was on the shore, had been paying attention to the movements on the sea. When he saw the pirate flagship suddenly set sail, he knew that things were not good. He was afraid that he would not be able to complete the mission given by the king. The pirates on the shore were not stupid. Seeing that their leader had escaped, they wished that they could grow 4 legs and run faster than rabbits. Unfortunately, they were not as lucky as Farah. The pirate leader had escaped, and the greatest credit was gone. Naturally, Su Chu had to make up for his mistake. If he let these small fries escape, then Su Chu would not be Su Chu. "Hey, where are you going?" Su Chu led a group of people and charged forward like a ferocious beast. In an instant, he rushed to the shore of the dock, turned around, and with a big saber in front of his chest, he glared angrily and shouted, Anyone who dares to take a step forward will be killed without mercy. Kill. Cooperating with Su Chu, the divine martial guards lined up on the shore in a murderous manner. When the pirates saw this, their faces turned pale. They knew that there was no way out. In fact, they were already scared out of their wits by the divine martial guards. Seeing this, they no longer had the will to fight. They looked at each other and knelt down one by one to surrender. "Sir, spare us. Sir, spare us." Speaking of which, pirates were the most unscrupulous. As long as it could save their lives, they would do anything. Humph. Although Su Chu despised them, he was not willing to wield his butcher's knife against a group of people who had surrendered. He ordered the divine martial guards to detain the remaining 5,000 pirates and deal with them when the battle was over. The merchants who were still at the dock saw that the ferocious pirates were killed in an instant, and the pirate leader fled in a panic. One by one, they came out of their hiding places and thanked the divine martial guards profusely. However, Su Chu could not stand it. He waved his hand and said, "Don't thank me. Hurry up and see if those burning ships can still be saved. Save as many as you can." "Yes, General." The merchants were also distressed. After thanking the divine martial guards, they immediately called the sailors to go and rescue the ships. Friendship City was the capital of commerce and was also an important node on the Grand Line. There were hundreds of merchant ships coming and going from the Brave Port every day. This time, the merchants had suffered heavy losses because of the pirates. Apart from admitting defeat, they could not find anyone to compensate them. They could only blame it on their bad luck. Su Chu took care of the pirates outside the city. The Stone Leopard tribe also successfully sealed the North Gate. As a result, the 4 gates of Friendship City were sealed. The pirates who were still fighting inside the city had no way out. Sure Leopard ordered, "Send the signal." "Yes, sir." With a whoosh, a red signal flare flew into the sky. Sure who was inside the city, saw this and became spirited. He waved the flag and said, "Press forward. Kill." The 1st and 2nd divisions of the Monolith Army were like ferocious beasts released from their cages, brazenly killing their way to the front lines. For a moment, the pirates who were still entangled with the Guard Division were caught unprepared. Under the charge of the Mountain Barbarians' heavy infantry, the pirates were forced to retreat. What's going on? Where did these reinforcements come from? The second leader of the Heavenly Wolf mercenary group, who was in charge of the front lines, frowned and began to feel uneasy. He ordered, "Quick, inform the big leader. There's a change at the front lines." Yes. In less than 20 minutes, the pirate responsible for sending the order had already returned. The second leader was furious. Why are they back so quickly? The pirate who sent the order stammered, "Be second leader, bad news. The city gate is blocked." What? The second leader's heart sank. Chapter 884. The 60,000 pirates who attacked Friendship City did not even last past the afternoon before they all surrendered. Nearly 30,000 pirates were buried in the city. After the war, the entire outer city was in a mess, corpses were everywhere, and the strong smell of blood permeated the streets and alleys. Even if there was a sea breeze, it would not dissipate for a long time. Gu Xiuan, the governor of the Friendship City, took responsibility to clean up the city, appease the people in the city, extinguish the fire, and count the casualties and financial losses. Everything was in order. The restless people gradually calmed down. In the governor's mansion, Ouyang Shua, who had won the battle, was not happy and had a straight face. First, it was just a group of pirates defeated in the battle. There was really nothing to show off. Second, Farah escaped again, which made Ouyang Shua quite depressed. Third, there was a lot of suspicion behind this matter, as if there was an invisible hand secretly manipulating everything. The attack on the Friendship City was not an accident. Although the pirates were repelled this time, it was a huge impact on the reputation of the Friendship City as a commercial capital, and even on the reputation of the Grand Line. As the news spread, this negative impact would gradually spread, and it would be difficult to eliminate in a short time. Just imagine, In the face of a city that could be attacked by pirates at any time, would the ocean merchants dare to stop here for supplies? In the face of an unstable sea route, how many merchants would be deterred? The answer was obvious. Behind this attack, the target was the trade foundation of the Great Xia dynasty, and the intention was sinister. In the afternoon, the commander of the Black Snake Guards, Black Snake, hurriedly teleported from Rabat City to the Friendship City. Ouyang Shua's instructions to Black Snake were very simple. Thoroughly investigate for me. Find out who else participated in this pirate attack. Intuitively, Ouyang Shua suspected that there should be Farah in Somalia. Yes, Black Snake did not dare to neglect and immediately mobilized a capable force, starting from interrogating the captured pirates to find out the mastermind behind scenes. The captured second leader naturally became the focus of the interrogation target of the Black Snake Guards. However, Ouyang Shua knew that Farah was the key figure and the soul of the pirate group. Therefore, Ouyang Shua ordered the former Mediterranean fleet, which had been renamed the Atlantic Fleet, to arrange the 4th and 5th groups to immediately cross the Mediterranean Sea and rush to the Gulf of Aden to arrest Pirate King Farah. Only by taking down Farah, completely wiping out the serious pirates, beheading him in public, and bringing him to justice can the lost credibility of the Friendship City be restored and the prosperity of the Grand Line be ensured. This time, Ouyang Shua would absolutely not allow the tiger to return to the mountain. Just as Ouyang Shua was pondering about the situation in the Gulf of Aden in the study room of the city lord's residence, Su Chu came to report, "Your Majesty, the division commander of the Friendship City Guard Division is outside, requesting to see you." Ouyang Shua's brows jumped when he heard this, and he was instantly infuriated as he fiercely said, "He still has the face to see this prince? Pass on the order that there is no need to see him. Immediately detain him and hand him over to the Bureau of Military Justice of the Bureau of Military Affairs to deal with." In this battle, a dignified garrison regiment that had the geographical advantage and a strong city to defend against the attack of 60,000 pirates actually lost the outer city in less than 3 hours. It was truly a disgrace to the Great Xia dynasty. Pirates were cruel, but it was also an objective fact that the Garrison Guard Division had neglected their training and failed to command properly during the war. If it were any other garrison division, they would not be in such a sorry state. Under such circumstances, how could Ouyang Shua not be furious? "Yes, Your Majesty." Su Chu rarely saw the king this angry. He dared not say much, and could only mourn for the division commander. It would have been better if he did not come to see His Majesty, as the king might have given him a lighter sentence. Now that he was in trouble, no one could help. From the poor performance of the Friendship City Guard Division, Ouyang Shua thought of other Garrison Guard divisions. It seems that there is a need for the Bureau of Military Affairs to conduct a major assessment on the various Garrison Guard divisions. Ouyang Shua thought to himself. It was a taboo for a dynasty to rule a place with lax military equipment. That night, Ouyang Shua personally hosted a banquet at the residence of the city lord to entertain the merchants in the Friendship City. To receive an invitation from Emperor Xia, it was a great fortune for the merchants. Naturally, Ouyang Shua's action was to appease the hearts of the merchants. He tried his best to reduce the impact of the attack on the trade in the Friendship City and to restore the confidence of the merchants. Originally, this matter could have been handled by the mayor, Gu Xiuan. However, the effect of Gu Xiuan's appearance and Ouyang Shua's appearance were different. In a huge banquet hall, Ouyang Shua raised his glass and the entire place quietened down. Ouyang Shua looked at the merchants and said, "The Friendship City was attacked by pirates, and the imperial court will not tolerate it. The Atlantic Fleet of the dynasty has set sail and will arrive at the Gulf of Aden in a few days. They will completely annihilate the serious pirate crew and return peace to the Gulf of Aden. Emperor Xia is wise." The merchants were overjoyed. They had been doing business in the Mediterranean Sea for many years, and they knew the prestige of the Atlantic Fleet. They knew that with this fleet, the serious pirate crew would not be spared. Their restless hearts gradually calmed down. Ouyang Shua continued, The imperial court has a responsibility to defend its territory. Everyone trusts the imperial court. That's why you stop to the friendship city to resupply. The imperial court will compensate you 100% for the losses caused by the pirate attack. Tomorrow, you can go to the residence of the city lord to register your losses. After verification, compensation will be made immediately. The merchants looked at each other. They did not expect such a good thing to happen. According to the normal rules, even if the imperial court did not give any compensation, the merchants had nothing to say. This kind of full compensation was unheard of. Thank you, Emperor Xia, for your grace. The merchants were so grateful, especially those who had suffered huge losses. They almost cried. Although the ocean trade was profitable, if all the goods were stolen, they would lose everything. The imperial court's action had saved the future of many merchants. Ouyang Shuo nodded. This move of his was similar to buying a bone with 1,000 gold. He would rather spend a little money to restore the merchant's confidence in the imperial court. This was more important than hundreds of thousands of gold coins. With this good news, the rest of the banquet was a joyous one. Ouyang Shuo bought people's hearts in the friendship city, but he did not expect to receive bad news the next day. The Atlantic fleet's 4th and 5th formation were ordered to cross the Mediterranean Sea. They were met with a collective protest from the lords of the Mediterranean Sea, so much so that they did not hesitate to stop the ongoing negotiations. In their words, since the great Xia dynasty has promised that the Atlantic fleet will not set foot in the Mediterranean Sea, they should keep their promise from now on. The Atlantic fleet's action is undoubtedly a breach of the promise. We deeply doubt the sincerity of the great Xia dynasty, Caesar said. In desperation, the head of the negotiation team, Violet, could only urgently ask Ouyang Shuo how to handle this matter. When Ouyang Shuo received the news, he was speechless for a long time. This time, the great Xia dynasty was in the wrong. But isn't the timing a little too coincidental? Ouyang Shuo could not help but be suspicious. Was there a connection between the negotiation and the pirate attack on the friendship city? Ouyang Shuo could not easily come to a conclusion. Last night, Ouyang Shuo had promised the merchants that he would send the Atlantic fleet to exterminate the pirates. If he broke his promise, it would be a slap in the face. All of Ouyang Shuo's previous efforts would be in vain. Faced with this dilemma, Ouyang Shuo finally set his sights on the southernmost part of the African continent. There was a magical place called the Cape of Good Hope. Before the Suez Canal was built, the sea route from Europe to Asia could only go from Western Europe to West Africa, and then around the Cape of Good Hope in South Africa to Asia. The Cape of Good Hope route became the only sea route for Europeans to go to the east. After the Suez Canal was opened, the role of this route decreased, but it was still an indispensable and important passage between Europe and Asia. Some large ships could not pass through the Suez Canal and had to make a detour here. Speaking of the Cape of Good Hope route, one had to mention the famous Crusades in European history. In 1000 AD, Europe began to change dramatically. The Roman Catholic believers hoped to drive the Muslims out of the Middle East. The Crusades launched by the Holy See began in 1096 and lasted for about 200 years. The appearance of a European army in the Middle East promoted the development of ocean trade. The Italian merchants in Venice and other places made a fortune by transporting and providing supplies to the warring parties. At the same time, when the Crusaders returned to Europe, they brought back spices, perfumes, silk, steel, and medicines from the Middle East, which became Europe's hot sellers. The ocean trade led to the rise of cities and towns, and also created a large number of wealthy European merchants. The power of European countries continued to grow. They set up armies and governments, and the taxes paid by the taxpayers were enough to maintain the operations of the armies and governments. By the 15th century, European countries were ready to move and were ready to explore. The Portuguese were the first to act. In 1400, they wanted to control the spice trade with the East. They wanted to bypass the middlemen in Venice and Arabia and directly do business with the East. If they could directly go to Asia to buy these goods by sea, they could greatly increase their profits. The Portuguese explorers had been to the west coast of Africa, hoping to find a route to India and East Asia. They finally arrived at the southernmost tip of the African continent, the Cape of Good Hope. Compared to the Suez Canal, the Cape of Good Hope was not an ideal route. Because the Cape of Good Hope was located at the convergence of the Indian Ocean's warm current and the Antarctic's cold current, the strong westerly jet stream set off stormy waves all year round. In addition to storms, killer waves often appeared here. The front of these waves was like a cliff, and the back was like a gentle hill. They appeared frequently in winter, and from time to time, they were coupled with the rotating waves caused by the polar wind. When these two kinds of waves overlapped, the sea conditions were even worse. Moreover, there was a very strong coastal current here. When the waves and currents met, the entire sea surface would roll like a boiling pot, and ships that sailed here would often suffer. Therefore, the Cape of Good Hope had become the most dangerous sailing area in the world. Ouyang Shua's plan to let the Atlantic fleet bypass the Cape of Good Hope and open up a route to Somalia was also a helpless choice. The destruction of Assyria's pirates was related to the credibility of the dynasty. As the king of the Great Xia dynasty, Ouyang Shua's words carried enormous weight. Since he had made a promise to the merchants, he had to fulfill it. Otherwise, he would be breaking his promise to the people and the world. Chapter 885. Ouyang Shua chose to open up the Cape of Good Hope route at this time because of his confidence and interests. Firstly, the nautical characteristics that Mazu gave the dynasty meant that the storm at the Cape of Good Hope would have a much weaker impact on the ships of the Great Xia dynasty. Moreover, it was summer now, so the threat of the waves was even smaller. Secondly, Ouyang Shu also wanted to open up a new sea route for the dynasty through the Atlantic fleet to ensure that when the Mediterranean Sea changed, the dynasty would have other options. It could be considered as finding a way out. Thirdly, the African continent nurtured great wealth, and it was really worth the risk. Historically, since the Spanish occupied Ceuta in 1415, the European powers began to colonize Africa. It reached its peak at the end of the 19th century and the beginning of the 20th century. About 95% of the African territory was divided by the powers, and resources were plundered for a long time. The great powers colonized Africa not because they had nothing to do, and naturally, there were benefits. Firstly, the vast land of the African continent could be reclaimed as countless cash crop planting areas, becoming an excellent raw material base. Secondly, the African continent was extremely rich in rare minerals, and it was an invisible treasure trove. The gold mines in South Africa, Zimbabwe, and other countries, the diamonds in the Congo, the magical Madagascar Islands, and so on were all worth exploring. Of course, Ouyang Shua did not agree with the European countries colonizing the African continent. He preferred to cooperate with the African countries through a more gentle method to achieve mutual benefits. As mentioned earlier, apart from a few Mediterranean countries like Egypt, most of Africa did not have the historical heritage of China, nor did they have the advanced technology of the West. However, they had a large population, and it was difficult for them to move forward in the game. Their only pleasure was to fight against each other among the large tribes. Precisely because of this, the Great Xia dynasty could export advanced agricultural technology to the African continent and use Africa's labor and natural resources to achieve mutual benefits. Of course, if it were to be implemented, it would be a very large systematic project, and it would not be done overnight. During this period, they would probably have to compete with the European and American lords. How could the European and American lords in the game care about the countless African continent? If the establishment of the Friendship City in Somalia was the first step for the dynasty to set foot on the African continent, and the occupation of Morocco was an important step to exert influence on the African continent, then opening up the Cape of Good Hope route was a key step for the dynasty to explore cooperation with the African continent. Thinking of this, Ouyang Shua immediately ordered the Atlantic Fleet Admiral Alvaro to personally lead the 4th and 5th fleets on the journey to open up the Cape of Good Hope route. This trip will be difficult and dangerous. Only an experienced Marine like Alvaro can make Ouyang Shua feel at ease. Ouyang Shua really wanted to know how the feudal lords of the Mediterranean Sea would feel when they found out that the sea route at the Cape of Good Hope had been opened up by the Great Xia dynasty. By that time, the only bargaining chip in their hands would no longer be reliable. June 5th, Friendship City. That day, Du Ruhe, the Minister of Military Affairs and Minister of Military Affairs, rushed from Rabat to Friendship City to report to the king the opinion of the Privy Council on the reorganization of the 290,000 surrendered soldiers in Morocco. 290,000 soldiers surrendered, including 120,000 surrendered soldiers from the territory and 170,000 Imperial Guards. After being appraised by the Bureau of Military Affairs, 10,000 disabled soldiers were no longer suitable to continue serving in the army. They were arranged to retire and return to their original homes. As a result, the actual number of soldiers that could be reorganized was 280,000, enough for 4 whole corps. The first to be formed were the 4 garrison divisions of the Morocco province, using up a total of 540,000 soldiers, mainly drawn from the territory's surrendered troops. Then there was the field army stationed in Morocco. The reorganization plan given by the Bureau of Military Affairs was different from the other corps, which made Ouyang Shua's eyes light up. In the study of the city lord's residence, Du Ruhue reported, the Bureau of Military Affairs has suggested that we establish a separate Morocco corps outside of the current army system to be responsible for the defense of the Morocco province. The designation of the dynasty's army was fixed, and Ouyang Shua had long since come up with an overall plan. In addition to the existing 5 corps, the Imperial Guard, the City Guard, the Dragon Stallion Army, the Stalwart Tiger Army, and the Hidden Leopard Army, there would also be 3 corps designations: the Imperial Guard, the Flying Bear Army, and the Soaring Eagle Army. According to the standards set by Ouyang Shua, if the dynasty did not have a new divine general joining, then these 3 corps designations would not be used. As a result, the Bureau of Military Affairs wanted to establish a separate corps outside of the army system. Du Ruhue continued, the Morocco Corps consists of 4 infantry divisions, 1 cavalry division, 1 direct brigade, 1 direct musketeer brigade, 1 aerial squadron, 1 marine unit, and 1 naval formation. It is a combination of land, sea, and air forces, with a total of 100,000 soldiers. Du Ruhue had spent a lot of thought on this organization. If the Morocco province were to base a corps like the Yunnan province, then the army would be too large and would drag the Morocco province down. And if they were to station an ordinary field corps, then the military strength would be slightly thin. Considering the strategic position of the Morocco province, as well as the rapid development of the dynasty's military industry, Du Ruhue had broken the rules and come up with this mixed organization plan. Equipping a musketeer brigade was firstly to fight against the Western musketeers, and secondly, the dynasty's industrialization had already achieved some results, so they had the ability to produce enough muskets. As for the formation of aerial squadrons, they had also benefited from the dynasty's industrialization. The pseudo-aircraft manufacturing technology obtained from Atlanta City had already been thoroughly understood by the 7th Research Institute. A month ago, the pseudo-aircraft manufacturing base had already been planned to land in Steel City. Thus, the time for the various corps to equip themselves with aerial squadrons was gradually approaching. The Morocco Corps was very lucky, becoming the first field corps to be equipped with such a squadron. With such a mixed army, sea, and air force holding the fort, the Morocco province would be safe. Ouyang Shua nodded approvingly, then said, "This prince generally agrees with the Bureau of Military Affairs reorganization plan for the Morocco Corps. However, since the Morocco Corps is different from the regular Army Corps, for the sake of distinction, the Morocco Corps can be officially named the Morocco Corps. In the Army's order of battle, a corps will be a combat unit between a corps and a corps, mainly used for overseas garrisons." "Your Majesty is wise." Du Ruhue was truly impressed. Ouyang Shua waved his hand and said, "There's no need to be impatient for the Morocco Corps' Marine Corps and Navy formation. Currently, the Atlantic Fleet is holding the fort in the surrounding waters, so the Morocco Corps' Navy formation can be allocated according to Z1 warships to avoid wasting resources. The Bureau of Military Affairs will have to discuss this with the Navy Command. Rest assured, Your Majesty, Du Ruhui's position in the Bureau of Military Affairs and the Grand Council was equivalent to building a bridge between the two organizations. It was helpful for cross-military communication and coordination, so Ouyang Shua didn't have to attend to everything personally. After the briefing, Ouyang Shua asked, "Does the Bureau of Military Affairs have anyone to recommend for the Corps Commander candidate?" Du Ruhui was startled, then bowed and said, "The Corps Commander candidate still needs Your Majesty's approval." Ouyang Shua thought for a moment, then said, "Then appoint Shi Dakai." As the #1 general of the Taiping Army, Shi Dakai wasn't just skilled in cold weapons, he was also familiar with firearms. Whether it was on land or on water, Shi Dakai had abundant combat experience. Assigning such a general to command the Morocco Corps was truly appropriate. The status of a corps was higher than that of a corps, and Shi Dakai had been promoted not long after taking the position of corps commander. It was clear how much Ouyang Shua liked this general. Coupled with the special nature of overseas armies, it was extremely easy for a general to become independent. Thus, a general that Ouyang Shua didn't fully trust could not assume this position. Shi Dakai's vacated position of 5th Dragon Stallion Army Commander will be given to Xiao Chaogui of the Stalwart Tiger Army 2nd Division. In addition, arrange for Fubo General Ma Yuan to assume the position of Morocco Corps Commander. Yes, Du Ruhui solemnly nodded, sighing in admiration at His Majesty's ability to judge the right people. Other than the 4 garrison divisions and the Morocco Corps, there were 26 million surrendered soldiers that needed to be reorganized. According to the Bureau of Military Affairs' previous reorganization plan, an Imperial Guard Corps would be formed, and the remaining soldiers would be assigned elsewhere. Of the Imperial Guard's 3 corps, the 1st Corps was stationed in the capital all year round, while the 2nd and 3rd Corps were cavalry corps. However, they lacked an infantry corps to rotate with the 1st Corps. But the incident at Friendship City had caused Ouyang Shua to change his mind. Ouyang Shua looked at Du Ruhui and said, "Follow the standards of the Morocco Corps and form the Somali Corps. Station them in Friendship City and ensure that Friendship City is safe." Du Ruhui's heart trembled. He had a vague feeling that His Majesty wasn't just forming the Somali Corps to defend Friendship City. It was likely that His Majesty had other ideas after Somalia's repeated disobedience. But this kind of conjecture was not something he could say. Ouyang Shua continued, "Di Qing, the commander of the Stalwart Tiger Army's 2nd Division, is to be the commander of the Somali Corps. Family Hua, the commander of the Stalwart Tiger Army's 3rd Division, will replace Di Qing as the commander of the 2nd Division. Hong Ing, the commander of the 3rd Division of the 3rd Division, will follow Fan Li Hua and be transferred to the 2nd Division's 1st Division." At present, the only ones qualified to be the commander of the 2nd Division were Shi Wansui, Di Qing, and Zhang Han. Du Ruhui was rather surprised that His Majesty had chosen Di Qing instead of the most trusted Shi Wansui. Little did he know that Ouyang Shua had other plans for this loyal general, Shi Wansui, in the future. With Di Qing's departure from the Stalwart Tiger Army, Fan Li Hua would be the Stalwart Tiger Army's #1 general, second only to Sun Bin. It was only natural for her to take over as the commander of the 2nd Division. At the same time, Ouyang Shua also made use of this opportunity to raise Hong Ying's rank by half. Ouyang Shua continued to make adjustments to the commanders. Zhao Shi, the commander of the Stalwart Tiger Army's 2nd Division's 1st Division, will be promoted to the commander of the 3rd Division. Speaking of which, it was time for Zhao Shi, the veteran, to show off his abilities. Du Ruhui nodded and noted down the series of adjustments made by His Majesty. The new round of military reorganization triggered by the Battle of Morocco, although there were no changes to the organization of the 3 armies, it truly affected the fate of the generals in the armies. Chapter 886. After the reorganization of the Somali Corps, there were still 26,000 surrendered soldiers left, which was only enough to form 2 divisions. To the Great Xia dynasty, this was undoubtedly of little value. Fortunately, Ouyang Shuo already had a plan. He said to Du Ruhui, the remaining 26,000 surrendered soldiers will be quietly handed over to Atlantis as a token of gratitude. Kalia had helped a lot in this battle in Morocco. Coupled with the previous series of events, Ouyang Shuo owed Kalia a huge favor. He had long said that he would give Atlantis a huge gift. The 26,000 surrendered soldiers were only a part of the gift. In addition, Ouyang Shuo was also preparing to select 50,000 people from the citizens of Morocco to migrate to Atlantis. In the future, the Morocco province would also shoulder the heavy responsibility of transporting food, vegetables, meat, and other daily necessities to Atlantis, becoming the strong backing of Atlantis. The Great Xia dynasty's aid to Atlantis would be comprehensive. This aid was nothing to the Great Xia dynasty, but to Atlantis, which was located in the sea, it was extremely precious. It was what they urgently needed. Du Ruhui did not object. With such a loyal ruler, what else could he say as a subject? After finalizing the reorganization plan, a new round of reorganization of the dynasty's army officially began. At the same time, the aftermath of the Morocco province by the cabinet was also nearing completion. Ouyang Shuo received the letter and simply took a detour from Friendship City to Rabat City. Before the Somali Corps arrived at Friendship City, the defense of Friendship City was temporarily guarded by Shurhu. In Rabat City, the provincial governor's office had already been rebuilt. Mu Lanyue, the first female governor of the dynasty, and also the first governor, had officially taken office. With the help of the cabinet, the governor's office had also been completed and officially opened for business. The first troublesome thing was to deal with the promissory note that Ouyang Shuo had previously written. Therefore, the first thing that Mu Lanyue said when she saw Ouyang Shuo was, "Brother King, you've caused me trouble." Ouyang Shuo avoided answering and said to Ko Jun, who was standing at the side watching the show, "Elder Ko, introduce the progress of the cabinet in dealing with the aftermath of the Morocco province." Ko Jun cupped his hands and bowed before officially reporting. This time, the cabinet had transferred 200 officials of various levels from the imperial court and the 4 major provinces to establish the provincial governor's yamen, the 4 major prefectural governor's yamen, and the prefectural and county yamen. Apart from this, the cabinet also investigated the original officials of Morocco one by one. With the cooperation of the Black Snake Guard, they eliminated those who were clearly hostile to the dynasty, and the remaining officials were basically kept in office. The only thing was that they had to be evaluated by the administration of personnel before they could be reappointed. The above actions were all routine actions and were no different from the methods used to take down other provinces. The uniqueness of the Morocco province lay in the clash of races and cultures. The cabinet's opinion was that, on the basis of respecting Arab culture as much as possible, the Chinese civilization should be gradually promoted to take root in the Moroccan province. The inclusive characteristics of the Chinese civilization should be brought into full play, and the original cultural essence of Morocco should be gradually absorbed and transformed, thereby radiating new vitality. The specific measures included taking advantage of the opportunity of promoting basic education in Morocco province, the parallel education of both Chinese and Arabic languages, and introducing 100 schools of thought into Morocco province. They would strive to complete the rotation of local officials in the Southwest University China Hall within a year, accept the influence of the dynasty's system and culture, and connect with the dynasty. At the same time, in some special towns with strong Arab culture, the governor's yamen allowed the local people to follow the example of the mountain barbarians and establish autonomous towns and autonomous villages, achieving limited regional autonomy. Especially in the eastern and southern mountains of Morocco province, the population was sparse and the environment was harsh. Small settlements were scattered in the vast mountains, and regional autonomy would be the main form of local governance. There were also many detailed plans, which would not be repeated. The premise of the above measures was that the people in the country were stable, or else it would be difficult to implement. For this reason, the governor's yamen decided to implement the dynasty's basic welfare system throughout the province. Agricultural tax would be reduced for a year, and commercial tax would be halved within a year to show the majesty of the emperor's kindness. The families of the people and soldiers who died in the war would also receive compensation and pension. Other than the establishment of the yamen at various levels, another important task of the cabinet was to assist the Morocco province governor's yamen and take the lead in formulating the overall development plan of Morocco province. This plan involved the division of administrative territory, industrial support plans, infrastructure construction plans, large-scale projects such as ports, livelihood projects, and cultural integration. With the current talent reserves of the dynasty, they already had the ability to formulate such a detailed and scientific development plan. In the plan, the construction of Xiota city that Ouyang Shua had previously instructed was naturally included. Other than that, the base city was also included in the jurisdiction of Morocco province. In the next 6 months, Morocco province would build 3 military ports in the 3 port cities of Tangier, Rabat, and Agadir to serve as the naval bases of the Atlantic Fleet. In view of the commitment to the Mediterranean Sea, the headquarters of the Atlantic Fleet would also be moved from the base city to Agadir. According to the plan, this included compensation and pension, as well as large-scale construction. The burden placed on the governor's yamen was not light. For this reason, the governor's yamen was prepared to apply for an administrative loan of 1 million gold coins from the Bank of the Four Seas. After listening to Ko Juan and Mulan Yu's report, Ouyang Shua was quite moved. After establishing the dynasty, a complete set of systems had gradually taken shape, and Ouyang Shua had indeed become more relaxed. This time, Ouyang Shua did not need to worry about the arrangements in Morocco province, and it had already been handled properly. Ouyang Shua smiled slightly. "Everyone, you have worked hard. We will carry it out as planned. We will solemnly obey the king's orders." Ko Juan bowed and secretly breathed a sigh of relief in his heart. Dealing with the aftermath of Morocco province was the first major task that the king had given Ko Juan since he had become the vice minister of the cabinet. In order to handle this matter well, Ko Juan rarely slept more than 5 hours recently. He was busy from morning to night, running through the 4 counties of Morocco province. Fortunately, his hard work had finally paid off. The king's approval of the plan was the greatest affirmation of Ko Juan. In the next few days, Ouyang Shua, accompanied by Governor Mulan Yu, began his routine inspection of Morocco province. He pacified the people, met with various officials, and boosted morale. When he had time, Ouyang Shua also went to the barracks to see the surrendered soldiers who were being reorganized. At this point, Ouyang Shua was no longer worried that if he did not personally participate in the reorganization of the army, there would be a situation where the soldiers only knew the general and did not know the ruler. This was because under the arrangements of the Bureau of Military Affairs, regardless of whether it was the active army or the reorganized army, there would be a period of loyalty and patriotism education in the army every month to spread Ouyang Shua's authority throughout the entire army. At the same time, under Ouyang Shua's instructions, the Bureau of Military Affairs cooperated with the Grand Council to formulate a series of measures on how to limit the power of the generals and prevent the overflow of military power. The future army of the dynasty would only become more standardized and professional. Just as Ouyang Shua was inspecting Morocco province, there was finally news of the king of Morocco, Mohammed VI, who had escaped during the chaos. However, this news was not good news for the great Xia dynasty. On the 10th of June, after going through many hardships, Mohammed VI and his entourage suddenly appeared in Algiers, the capital of neighboring Algeria, under the protection of the commander of the imperial guards, Ismail. In the afternoon, the Algerian royal family issued a public statement, saying that from this moment on, the members of the Moroccan royal family would be under the protection of Algeria. Any attempt to assassinate Mohammed VI would be a provocation to the Algerian royal family, and they would definitely retaliate. His attitude was rather unyielding. At the same time, Muhammad VI also announced that, with the support of the Algerian royal family, he would officially establish a kingdom in exile in Algiers in an attempt to restore his country. In the declaration, Muhammad VI also called on the people of Morocco to take action and fight against the rule of the Great Saud dynasty. In line with Muhammad VI's declaration, the Algerian royal family immediately allocated a large piece of land to Muhammad VI in the core area of the capital to build the center of the kingdom in exile. On this land, the Moroccan royal family in exile would have absolute autonomy and autonomy. Its nature was similar to a concession or consulate in reality. When the news came out, it caused a huge uproar in the Mediterranean Sea and the African continent. Some of the suzerains in the African continent had already prepared gifts and were prepared to send envoys to Morocco to test the attitude of the Great Saud dynasty towards the African continent. After receiving the news, some of the suzerains had already canceled their trips at the last minute. Even some of the envoys that were already on their way were urgently recalled by the suzerains. Muhammad VI's declaration of establishing a kingdom caused the situation in Morocco, which was originally a foregone conclusion, to suddenly change. There were many variables out of nowhere. Therefore, the smart suzerains naturally chose to wait and see. The ongoing negotiations between the Great Saud dynasty and the suzerains of the Mediterranean Sea had also become troublesome because of this matter. Violet reported that the negotiation process had suddenly become difficult. Speaking of this, he had to introduce the country of Algeria. Algeria was a country in the Maghreb in the north of Africa. Its land area was the largest in Africa, the largest in the Mediterranean Sea, and the largest in the Arab Sea. It was ranked 10th in the world, with a total population of 3.5 million. Geographically, Algeria was bordered by the Mediterranean Sea in the north, Libya and Tunisia in the east, Niger, Mali, and Mauritania in the southeast and south, and Morocco in the west. In reality, the economic scale of the Algerian region was ranked 4th in Africa, behind South Africa, Nigeria, and Egypt. Oil and natural gas were the pillars of Algeria's national economy. Its natural gas reserves were ranked 5th in the world, and its oil reserves were ranked 14th in the world. Therefore, whether it was on the African continent or in the Mediterranean Sea, Algeria could be considered a pivotal country, playing an important role between the Mediterranean Sea and Africa. Because of this, the suzerains of the Mediterranean Sea and the African continent felt that the Great Saud dynasty would definitely not be able to do anything to Muhammad VI. Chapter 887. 12th of June, Rabat City, Morocco Province. The news that Muhammad VI had appeared in Algeria and established a kingdom in exile made Ouyang Shua hastily end his inspection of Morocco Province and return to Rabat City. At the governor's office, Milanu, the governor of Morocco Province who had returned with Ouyang Shua, held her first political meeting since taking office. The 4 county governors and the 4 directors of the governor's office were all present. Ouyang Shua sat at the side and listened, making all the officials present feel pressured. On the way back, Ouyang Shua and Milanu had a detailed discussion on how to eliminate the influence of Muhammad VI establishing a kingdom in exile and ensure the stability of Morocco Province. Milanu had directly given the order for this meeting to be held. The offices at all levels must strengthen their patrols. Once they find someone spreading rumors, they must be arrested immediately. They must not be tolerated. At the same time, pay attention to the direction of public opinion and expose the absurd behavior of Muhammad VI during his reign. Let the people realize under whose rule they can live a good life. The resettlement work of the counties and counties must be expedited. Before the immigrants arrive, we must make preparations to accept them. Do not be negligent. This work will be included in the governor's office's annual key assessment. If it is done well, I will report it to the imperial court for merit. If it is not done well, prepare to lose your job. When the officials heard this, they replied in unison, "We will obey the governor's orders." Ouyang Shua nodded to himself. Although Melania was young, she could still hold her ground in a big situation. This little girl already had a hint of the demeanor of a feudal official. With a little more training, she would become a good helper. Ouyang Shua had not misjudged her. After the meeting, Ouyang Shua summoned the black snake who had rushed over. When he saw the king, the black snake immediately apologized. The black snake guards did not do their job well. "Please punish us, your majesty." Ouyang Shua waved his hand and said, "This matter is not your fault." The overseas intelligence network established by the Black Snake Guards was still very weak. They did not have a foundation in the eastern mountains of Morocco and the Algerian region. It was normal that they could not find Muhammad VI. Another point was that Muhammad VI and his party had appeared in Algeria's capital, Algiers, so they must have passed through an official courier station. In that case, after Muhammad VI entered the country, the Algerian royal family was involved. Algeria was also an important member of the Mediterranean Sea. Ouyang Shua had reason to suspect that the Mediterranean Sea was behind this series of events, including the serious pirate group's attack on Friendship City. It could even be said that it had the shadow of the Silver Hand. Without the coordination of the Silver Hand, they would never have been able to come up with such a comprehensive plan. His purpose was simple. Firstly, he wanted to disrupt the Great Xia dynasty's global strategy and sow discord between the Great Xia dynasty, the Mediterranean Sea, and the African continent. Secondly, he wanted to increase his bargaining chips in the negotiations with the Great Xia dynasty. In such an important negotiation, whoever had more bargaining chips would have more confidence and chances of success. A further consideration would probably be the conflict of interest between the two sides in the African colonization. If the Great Xia dynasty were to gain a firm foothold on the African continent, the European and American members of the Silver Hand would be uneasy. The Silver Hand had never given up on restraining the Great Xia dynasty. Our opponents are very difficult to deal with. Ouyang Shua sighed. Hearing that, the Black Snake nodded with a solemn expression. It was only when they arrived overseas that the Black Snake felt the difficulty of carrying out intelligence work. There were traps and obstacles everywhere. Most of the time, problems could not be solved with money. Especially when they were out of Asia, the difference in race made it difficult for the Black Snake Guards to move around. The fact that the Black Snake Guards' overseas intelligence network could develop to its current scale was due to the Black Snake's brilliant methods and good leadership. It was precisely because he realized that the Silver Hand might be hiding behind the scenes that Ouyang Shua was very cautious about Algeria. If he were to go to war with Algeria at this time, he would undoubtedly fall into the Silver Hand as trap. In that case, not only would the negotiations with the Mediterranean Sea be forced to stop, but the African continent's suspicion of the Great Xia dynasty would also reach its peak. It would be impossible to talk about cooperation, and it would be exactly what the other party wanted. To say the least, Algeria was not a pushover like Morocco. Once the war started, if the Mediterranean Sea countries and North African countries were to participate, the Great Xia dynasty would definitely be dragged into the quagmire of war. Otherwise, how would the Algerian royal family have the confidence to make such a declaration? A murderous look flashed in Black Snake's eyes as he said, "Your Majesty, I have arranged for someone to kill Muhammad VI." Ouyang Shua waved his hand and said, "Muhammad VI naturally has to die, but this matter cannot be rushed. We need to have sufficient patience. The other party is being so high-profile. Perhaps they have already set up a trap and are waiting for us to take the bait." Black Snake fell silent. Ouyang Shua said, "When Muhammad VI left, didn't he bring a team of imperial guards with him?" Let's start with the family members they left behind in Rabat City and patiently set up a trap to catch a big fish. For now, Morocco province is not in chaos, so we still have time. In addition, the Black Snake Guards have to cooperate with the Governor General's office in the near future to clean up Morocco province. With Muhammad VI's words, this king thinks that those rats hiding in the shadows are probably very happy, right? This king can use this opportunity to clean them up. Your humble servant understands. Black Snake nodded with a murderous look. Morocco province was about to have another bloody storm. Ouyang Shuo rubbed his forehead and leaned back in his chair. He waved his hand and said, "Go make the arrangements. Tell the men below not to be discouraged. This king still has great trust in the Black Snake guards." "Thank you for your trust, your majesty." Black Snake cupped his fists as a hint of excitement flashed in his eyes. The appearance of Muhammad VI in Algeria had put the secret agents of the Black Snake Guards in charge of tracking Muhammad VI under great pressure. With the king's words, they could die without regrets. In the large study, Ouyang Shuo leaned back in his chair alone. He closed his eyes and pondered. He looked a little tired. Recently, things had happened one after another, making Ouyang Shuo feel a little tired. After a long time, Ouyang Shuo opened his eyes and muttered to himself, "It's really getting more and more interesting." Although he was tired, he had to continue fighting when it was time to fight. Ouyang Shuo reinvigorated himself and wrote a letter to Violet. The negotiations in the Mediterranean Sea had to continue. If the negotiation team gave up halfway or acted on impulse and did not want to talk anymore, then it would truly fulfill the wishes of the Silver Hand. In the letter, Ouyang Shuo urged Violet to do a good job of appeasing the members of the negotiation team. He told them to calm down and withstand the pressure. At the same time, he asked Korea to mediate and find a way to continue the negotiations. Among the Mediterranean Sea lords, there were still a large number of lords who did not want to shed all pretense of cordiality. As long as they used their brains and diplomatic wisdom, Ouyang Shuo believed that the current difficulties could be overcome. The key was not to be thrown into confusion. In dealing with such thorny problems, China's wisdom could often break the ice. At the end of the letter, Ouyang Shuo wrote, "If the negotiations are successful, all of you will be greatly rewarded when you return to Shanghai City. I won't be stingy with the title of nobility." At the moment, the greatest reward of the dynasty, and also the highest honor, was the title of nobility. With such a generous reward, there was no need to worry that the members of the negotiation team would not do their best. The next morning, Ouyang Shuo packed his luggage and prepared to return to Shanghai City. With Milan Lanyue and Shur Dakai, two big shots in the Morocco province, Ouyang Shuo was very relieved. If Ouyang Shuo continued to stay in Labate City, it would instead arouse suspicions among his allies. If Ouyang Shuo left just like that, those who coveted him would not dare to act rashly. Before leaving, Ouyang Shuo gave Mulan 4 words, suppressed with calmness. At this point, Ouyang Shuo's calligraphy had a solid foundation, and it had the sharpness of a king. It could barely be classified as calligraphy. Ouyang Shuo gave Mulan Lanyue these 4 words not only to remind her to handle the matter of Muhammad VI's kingdom in exile, but also to teach her the way of an official. As a high-ranking official, she had to handle matters calmly and without any ripples in her heart. Mulan Lanyue took the calligraphy and said with a smile, "I want to mount this calligraphy and hang it in my study." Ouyang Shuo pointed at his heart and said with a smile, "It's useless to just hang it. You have to remember it." "I will remember brother's teachings." Mulan Lanyue bowed. She would naturally remember her brother's advice and care. Ouyang Shuo nodded and turned to enter the teleportation array. At 10 in the morning, Ouyang Shuo returned to the summer palace. The matter of Muhammad VI's kingdom in exile only caused waves in the Mediterranean Sea and Africa. The China region did not have much of a response and remained calm. As soon as he sat down in the imperial study, Ouyang Shuo said to Qingyi, "Tell Pei Yun and Meng Jida to come see me." "Yes." After a while, the 2 officials rushed to the imperial study. "Your humble servant greets your majesty. Have a seat." Ouyang Shuo called the 2 of them over mainly to supervise the immigration. With him mentioning it, things could be done faster and lessen Mulan Lanyue's burden. He said, "Official Pei, how is the progress of the immigration in Morocco?" Pei Yun's heart tightened. Although the king's tone was calm, the tactful Pei Yun immediately realized that the king was dissatisfied with the progress of the immigration work. She replied carefully, "The Civil Affairs Department has already compiled a booklet introducing the Morocco province and the immigration policy. It has been distributed in all the major cities. In view of the dynasty's prestige, there are countless applicants. Currently, the Civil Affairs Department is speeding up the examination of the immigration qualifications. Ouyang Shuo did not deny it and said, "The immigration matter needs to be resolute and decisive. This time, the examination conditions for the immigration can be loosened. The Civil Affairs Department also needs to increase the number of examiners. If there are not enough people, we can temporarily transfer people from the Yamen of Zhili province or the local Yamen. We must complete the immigration work within half a month." "Yes, Your Majesty." Pei Yun bowed, while secretly wiping the cold sweat on her forehead. Although the wrath of the emperor is not shown on his face, it is still as powerful as a thunderbolt. We do not dare to be careless. Chapter 888. In the imperial study, Pei Yun left first, leaving Meng Jida behind. Ouyang Shuo first mentioned the matter of a 1 million gold coins administrative loan to Morocco province, saying, "This matter has to be handled in a special way, so the procedures can be simpler. Send the money over as soon as possible. They urgently need it." Meng Jida nodded, saying, "Please rest assured, Your Majesty. This humble subject will personally oversee this matter and liaise with Morocco province's governor's office, striving to approve the funds within a week." Ouyang Shuo smiled in satisfaction. He liked Meng Jida's swift and decisive actions. Although Pei Yun and the other historical officials were useful, they still carried traces of ancient officialdom and were not efficient enough. They were unlike players like Meng Jida, who believed in efficiency in the workplace. Ouyang Shuo had summoned Meng Jida not for this matter, but because he had an idea to touch base with Meng Jida, the manager of the bank, to see if it was feasible. This idea had vaguely appeared during the attack on Morocco, and when the Friendship City incident broke out, it became even clearer. Ouyang Shuo said, "Do you know of the compensation that Rabat City and Friendship City give to merchants?" This humble subject knows a thing or two. "What do you think of this matter?" Meng Jida was startled. This was not within the scope of his authority, but since the king had asked, he had to say something. After thinking for a moment, he simply said, "Short-term losses, long-term gains." Meng Jida analyzed this matter from the perspective of investment, and sure enough, his words never deviated from his old profession. Ouyang Shuo revealed the mystery, saying, "This prince is thinking that if the imperial court compensates merchants every time their interests are damaged, in the long run, I'm afraid that those merchants will become dependent and act unscrupulously." The human heart was the most complicated, especially to merchants. In reality, cheating the government of subsidies often happened, not to mention in the game. This was the difficulty of governing a country. Some policies issued by the imperial court might have good intentions, but if they were implemented in the long run, they might change in the end. Thus, when the imperial court made policies, they had to consider all aspects. It was not something that could be decided on a whim, and Ouyang Shuo did not want this kind of compensation to become the norm. Ouyang Shuo was thinking if he could come up with a more creative way to solve this problem. Meng Jida added, "Your Majesty's worries are not without reason." Meng Jida was no longer surprised by the king's viciousness and was instead used to it. Ouyang Shuo said, "Since that's the case, is it possible for the Bank of the Four Seas to use this opportunity to start insurance? We can start from a most scarce marine insurance." The concept of insurance was not unique to modern society. In 2500 BC, the ancient Babylonian kingdom ordered monks, judges, and village chiefs to collect taxes as funds for fire relief. In the Roman Empire, the empire, the empire, the empire, the empire, the empire. Roman Empire, the empire, the Roman Empire, the empire, the empire, the empire. All of these were the initial forms of insurance, which gradually became the insurance system. With the development of trade, in 1792 BC, during the time of Hammurabi, the sixth king of ancient Babylon, commerce flourished. In order to aid commerce and protect the caravan's horses and mules and goods, Hammurabi's code of law provided for joint sharing of compensation for losses. This situation was very close to the compensation mechanism of the Great Xia dynasty's ocean-going caravans. In 916 BC, in the Mediterranean Sea on the island of Rhodes, the king enacted the Rhodian maritime law in order to ensure the normal operation of maritime trade. It stipulated that if a cargo owner suffered a loss, the owner of the ship and all the cargo owners of the ship would share the loss. This was the origin of maritime insurance. The Great Xia dynasty had the advantage of monopolizing the world trade and shipping routes. Ocean trade was flourishing, and the Bank of the Four Seas had a lot of capital. This provided the dynasty with the conditions to develop marine insurance. When Meng Jida heard this, his eyes lit up and he said excitedly, "Your Majesty's suggestion is very feasible." Following the establishment of the dynasty, the Bank of the Four Seas savings continued to grow. On the contrary, with the expansion of the country's territories, the number of customers dwindled. The Bank of the Four Seas is facing the awkward situation of not being able to spend their savings. Starting the insurance business at this time would solve the Bank of the Four Seas predicament and provide a new source of profit. Feasible? It really is feasible. Actually, Meng Jida had left out something. Once the insurance business was successfully developed, it would mean that the Great Xia dynasty's modernization would go up another level. Furthermore, it would be a great boost to ocean trade. With the insurance guarantee, it would definitely stimulate the passion and motivation of the merchants to develop ocean trade. On this point, Europe, which was the origin of the insurance industry, did not have such a unique advantage. European countries had few players, so the banks they opened were unable to absorb as much capital as the Bank of the Four Seas. Even in ocean trade, they had long fallen behind the Great Xia dynasty. Looking at the entire world, other than the Panama Canal and the American continent, the Great Xia dynasty had already completed the layout of the key global shipping routes. The European and American countries could only follow behind the Great Xia dynasty and eat the leftovers. Ouyang Shuo never expected Meng Jida to be so excited. He said with a smile, "This king only has a suggestion. As for the actual feasibility evaluation and implementation plan, it will still depend on you professionals." Meng Jida bowed and said excitedly, "Your Majesty, please rest assured. The Bank of the Four Seas will definitely evaluate the feasibility of developing the insurance industry in the shortest time possible and come up with a feasible implementation plan." Ouyang Shuo nodded and said, "That's good. This king will wait for your good news." Who would have thought that in this room, after the entertainment industry, another industry, under Ouyang Shuo's bold expansion, would burst forth with unprecedented brilliance in the game, rising like a pearl. After Meng Jida left, Ouyang Shuo asked Cyan Shirt, "How's the progress of the agreement with Heartstone City?" When Ouyang Shuo went to Friendship City to deal with the sudden incident, the relevant negotiations had already begun. It had been 10 days since then. Before leaving, Ouyang Shuo had instructed Cyan Shirt to follow up on this matter from the secret text pavilion. Cyan Shirt raised his head and picked up a document from the table. He handed it over and said, "It has been basically finalized 2 days ago. Lord Taowu's side has no objections. We're just waiting for your return to make the final decision." Ouyang Shuo took the document and said with a smile, "That's quite efficient." Cyan Shirt explained, "Lord Taowu's side is a little anxious, so the negotiations went much smoother than expected." Ouyang Shuo instantly understood, and as he flipped through the documents, he casually asked, "We didn't take advantage of others while they were down, did we?" He didn't want to arouse suspicion in Lao AI's heart, because he was greedy for a small advantage. Cyan Shirt said with a smile, "You told them before you left. How would they dare?" "That's good." After flipping through the document, the terms were basically the same as what Ouyang Shuo had envisioned. Heartstone City had to follow the Great Xia dynasty as its suzerain. First, become a vassal. Taowu would accept the appointment of the Great Xia dynasty as the governor of Fengtian County. He would enjoy a high degree of autonomy within his jurisdiction under the framework of the Great Xia dynasty code. Second, hand over diplomatic rights. Heartstone City had to maintain the same diplomatic relations with the Great Xia dynasty at all times. Major diplomatic matters had to be reported to the Great Xia dynasty in advance. If necessary, the Chamberlain of Dependencies could participate. Third, hand over tributes. Heartstone City had to hand over 300,000 gold coins as tributes every year, which could be compensated with coal of considerable value. Correspondingly, the Great Xia dynasty had to fulfill the following obligations. First, confer nobility. The Great Xia dynasty had to confer the title of third-class marquis to Tao Wu and make Fengtian County his fief. Second, military protection. In addition to helping Heartstone City build a coastal fleet, the Great Xia dynasty also had to station a field army in Heartstone City. Of course, the daily military expenses of the army would be borne by Heartstone City. Third, waive customs duties. When goods from Heartstone City entered the country, the Great Xia dynasty would waive all customs duties. Of course, goods from the Great Xia dynasty would also be exempted from customs duties. Fourth, other assistance. The Great Xia dynasty had to nurture 100 civil officials, 50 military officers, 100 medical officers, 50 shipbuilders, and 100 blacksmiths for Heartstone City every year. In addition, the Great Xia dynasty would also invest in the construction of steel mills, munitions factories, and artillery manufacturing projects to promote the industrialization of Heartstone City. These were just the major terms. The agreement also included details on politics, military, economy, culture, technology, and other aspects. It covered all aspects of the territory's construction. All in all, it was a win-win situation. Heartstone City would sacrifice some honor and autonomy in exchange for the full support and military protection of the Great Xia dynasty. After reading the document, Ouyang Shua had mixed feelings. At this moment, he thought of the lively scene when the Mountain and Sea Alliance was first established. It had only been a few years, but the allies had disappeared one by one. The only one left was the fallen Phoenix City. Times had changed. The Mountain and Sea Alliance that needed allies to contend with the Yin-Huang Alliance had now grown into a giant in the China region. It had become an existence that the Yin-Huang Alliance had to fear and look up to. Ouyang Shua had long turned his attention to the world. His main competitor had changed from the arrogant Yin-Huang Alliance to the even more arrogant Silver Hand. Ouyang Shua's thoughts had also become more and more unfathomable. From a warm-hearted young man, he had gradually transformed into a lonely king who sat on a cold throne and had no friends to talk to. Survival of the fittest. The wilderness was cruel and real. Your Majesty? Cyan reminded and interrupted Ouyang Shua's thoughts. Ouyang Shua was startled and immediately came back to his senses. He put down the document in his hand and said calmly, "I've seen the document. Let's draft an official agreement according to it. We will hold a signing ceremony at the Summer Palace and invite all the media to participate. We will announce this news to the public." Since he had already done it, Ouyang Shua did not intend to hide it. Okay, Cyan nodded and agreed. This was not a difficult task. Mobile users, please browse and read for a better reading experience. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.